I'm Alex Michelson, live in Los Angeles. Welcome to a very special edition of The Story Is. It's election night in America, my favorite night of the year. It's another busy primary night with 5 states holding races to determine who will face off in the November midterm elections with control of Congress at stake. Voters have been casting ballots in Missouri, Kansas, Virginia, and Washington state. But much of the attention of the country right now is on the battleground state of Michigan. It's still too soon to tell who will win the state's Democratic Senate primary, a closely watched showdown between progressive Dr. Abdul El-Sayed and Congress member Haley Stevens. This race, seen as another major test of the future direction of the Democratic Party as a whole. Whoever wins this nomination will face off against former House Republican Mike Rogers, who ran virtually unopposed after an endorsement from President Trump. We've got team coverage from around Michigan, but we begin with CNN's chief national correspondent, John King, at the Magic Wall in Washington. John, a lot of people thought this race would be called by now.
This is Michigan, Alex. In Michigan, if it's consistent for one thing, counting votes slowly. But we are getting there, and one of the reasons you might have thought maybe we wouldn't need them all to call it, but it's a relatively close race, although Dr. El-Sayed has stretched it out a little bit, nearly a 30,000 vote lead. You see it right there, 50 to 47 if you're rounding those up, about 64%, so we're almost at 2/3 of the votes. Sometimes, though, we get late into the morning. I call it breakfast menu time when Wayne County, especially Detroit, comes in, Alex. So what are we waiting for? If you look at the map right now, the dark blue is Haley Stevens. She's the Democratic member of Congress, the establishment favorite, as you said. The light blue is Abdul El-Sayed, worked for Bernie Sanders in 2016, helped him write his book about Medicare for All, has written his own book about Medicare for All. He's the light blue on the map there. So you see them slugging it out county by county. El-Sayed has now stretched it out to 33,000 votes at 65%. The question is, at this point of the night, what are you waiting for? Right, so let's just bring this up down here. The bubbles tell you places where we're still waiting, outstanding votes, right? And the size of the bubble tells you that you're waiting for more votes. Let me stretch this out just a little bit. The largest bubble there, and it's dark blue, meaning Haley is winning that area at the moment, is Detroit, Wayne County, metropolitan Detroit, the largest population center in the state, Alex, and of course the center of the Democratic base, right? I was just checking some of the precincts with my team here. Dearborn Heights coming in, their Arab American communities coming in overwhelmingly for El-Sayed. Haley Stevens is doing better in some of the black areas of downtown Detroit. As of a few minutes ago, only 30% of the Detroit city votes were in. So we got a lot to wait for in Detroit. What else are we missing? You see these circles. If you're Stevens, you see that big circle, knowing so much is missing in Detroit. That gives you hope because that's more math, if you will. But if you see El-Sayed has some circles as well as you come out, I just want to blank this out for 1 second. As you watch this play out, if El-Sayed can pull out a win here, he's leading right now. One of the stories will be, especially if Haley Stevens holds on to this lead in Detroit, is in some of the smaller cities. This is Ingham County, is Lansing, that's the state capital. Look at the margin right here, 63 to 32. Then we're going to come out here, Kent County. Sorry if people are getting dizzy. You have to come in and out to do the wall here. Kent County, that's Grand Rapids and the suburbs around it. Again, look at the big margin there. I'll just give you one more so I don't give people whiplash. Kalamazoo down here. Kalamazoo County, again, look at the margins. In the big city, Detroit, Haley Stevens right now has a pretty healthy lead, and that matters because it's the largest city. But in some of the smaller cities, you see Dr. El-Sayed doing quite well. But in the end, Alex, as I toss back to you, I'm just going to check one more time. We're at 49% in Wayne County, which means we have a ways to go. And there have been times when it's sometimes 3, 4, 5 in the morning when we get more votes out of Wayne County. So at the moment, Haley Stevens winning in Wayne County, which again is more votes than any else you're going to get. But Dr. El-Sayed stretching that out a little bit, 33,000 and change as we get to the 2/3 mark. But guess what? That last 35% is going to decide who wins.
Well, it sounds like it's going to be a long night, which is why we have a 3-hour show ahead. John King at the Magic Wall, an honor to have you start off our show tonight. We've got team coverage in Detroit. CNN's Arlette Saenz is with the Dr. Abdul El-Sayed campaign. Jeff Zeleny is at the Haley Stevens campaign. Let's start with Arlette, and it sounds like it's loud behind you.
Yeah, it is. They actually just came on stage to try to rile up supporters as they are waiting to hear from Abdul El Sayed. A campaign aide came over the speaker and said that they do expect that El Sayed will speak tonight regardless of whether there is a call in this race. They said to expect him to speak by 1 o'clock this morning. They've asked their supporters to stick around, and you can hear them now engaging in this singing chant to try to keep people engaged. I talked to someone who went to a bodega down the street to get some food, so they're preparing for the long haul here. But this is a race that right now the campaign is watching very closely as these results continue to pour in. They had expected, they had hoped that this might have been called a bit earlier in the evening, but throughout the day they did acknowledge that Wayne County is often very slow in their vote counting. So we do know that El Sayed is here in the building. He's been watching these results pour in with his family and his advisors, and one campaign aide told me that they are still feeling confident even as there has been this tightening in this race. They are really hoping to show that the progressive movement does have momentum here in a battleground state like Michigan. We've seen success in very blue areas like New York City and areas like Denver for progressive candidates, and they are hoping to replicate that success here in a much more purple state. I will also note that a few moments ago when they showed Republican former Congressman Mike Rogers on the screen behind me, this crowd erupted into very loud boos. They are very focused on the need to unite in order to defeat Rogers, no matter who the candidate will be. El Sayed has said that he would be willing to campaign for Stevens if she did emerge as the nominee, and she has said vice versa. And that will really be one of the challenges after this Democratic Party, is whether the party can in fact unite after what's been an incredibly divisive contest over the last over a year.
Yeah, I mean, interesting song choice right now, Arlette. Say a Little Prayer, which is an interesting thing based off of what's happening. But Arlette, just to nail this down, what you just said, we expect Dr. El Sayed to speak within the next hour regardless?
Yes, that is what a campaign aide came over the speakers to tell the attendees. They said that they do expect him to speak no later than 1 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. They said if the race gets called sooner, that he could come out a lot sooner. But right now they're trying to keep their focus on keeping these supporters engaged, so they have some people here for when he comes out later this night.
All right, well, they're saying a little prayer, where Arlette is. Jeff, what's going on where you are? What's the mood? And are people feeling enthused at this point?
Well, Alex, there is no question that Haley Stevens supporters had a long, early part of the evening. There were some glum faces, upbeat moods, but they were resigned to thinking that this may not go their way. That turned around about 10:30 or so here in the East when a big batch of absentee ballots came in. And again, for all the nationalized focus of this race, it's hard to think of a Senate primary that's been more nationalized than this. This is a very local race at this point, all about Detroit, all about Wayne County. So the Stevens campaign is keeping a close eye on that. She is winning Wayne County, but the question is, will the margins be enough to offset her shortcomings elsewhere? We don't know the answer to that yet, and it's unclear if she is going to address her crowd or not. You can see behind me, very few people here, but there are still a lot of people just off to the side of this ballroom. So we are standing by to see if she is going to say anything. But again, I was just speaking a short time ago with former Michigan Senator Debbie Stabenow, and she reminded me that in her victory to the Senate, it wasn't called until the next morning about 10 a.m. So this is very common and typical for Detroit and Wayne County. But Haley Stevens was clearly at the end of this campaign not running with the energy that Abdul El Sayed was. But what these results make clear is this is a much closer race than anyone expected. And even if he is the winner, this shows that there are many people in this state, particularly African-American voters right here in Detroit, who did not find his message appealing. So he has even more work to do, should he win, to unify this party. Again, Stevens supporters are still somewhat optimistic, but again, it is a bit of a caveat. One aide told me just a short time ago, he said we can still win this if we pull out a strong turnout in Detroit, but that is an if. So we will see, but this certainly was not the overwhelming showing that many progressives had come in here to Detroit hoping for. Alex.
Jeff Delney, thank you for that. We will go check in with you. And we've got music from Detroit in both places. Let's go straight to our political panel for the night. Joining me here in Los Angeles is Ron Brownstein, senior political analyst and opinion columnist at Bloomberg, former Congressmember Katie Porter, former candidate for governor and for senator from California. She was the first Democrat elected to represent California's 45th congressional district. And Matt Klink is a Republican strategist and owner and president of Klink Campaigns Incorporated. Full house tonight, lots to talk about. Ron, let's start with you.
Yeah.
And so far, reason to keep watching.
Absolutely. I mean, the late, we did not have high quality public polling, independent public polling at the end, but the kind of mishmash of polls that we had, most of them from the El Sayed camp, had him way ahead, 15 to 20 points ahead. And look, I mean, if you look at the base of support of each of these candidates, it's very consistent with what we've seen in other primaries around the country that have had this kind of left-center divide. He is relying, even though he styles himself as an economic populist, not really winning that many working class voters, relying primarily on college graduates and young people. So college graduates turn out in primaries, young people are a little iffier, and her coalition is what, we used to talk about as the beer track coalition of the Democratic Party. Seniors, black voters, non-college whites, maybe a little bit more reliable voters, which probably explains part of the problem with the polling, maybe overestimated how many young people would show up. It still looks like his hand is a little better, but there are some pretty clear warning signs for him in terms of these results about what a general election might look like.
And Congresswoman, you say this is sort of the representation that maybe X or Twitter is not real life.
Yeah, I mean, I think you saw so much enthusiasm on the internet for Abdul El Sayed. He's very charismatic. He's been running a podcast. Let's face it, he's good looking. He's enthusiastic. He's new in office. Haley Stevens has been in Congress 8 years, and she's being styled here. She started with me, and she's being styled here as the establishment, like career politician. And so I think you saw a lot of enthusiasm about El Sayed as a new voice, and that is, I think, good for the Democratic Party. But I think Democrats are also, with Trump, with so much at stake, saying to themselves, I want to know what I'm getting. I want to know what someone's going to do. I want the person who's shown they can win in Michigan in the past.
Yeah.
How do you see the numbers so far, Matt?
If I were Dr. El Sayed, I'd be a little worried right now that I think that his campaign they started to drink their own Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
And I think that it's a heck of a lot closer. And I think that, your reporter, Jeff, highlighted it. It's going to be the spread in Wayne County. He won't win Wayne County, but it's the spread. If it's a big spread, it's going to be a really bad night for him. But he did run a good campaign. He ran on 3 issues. Less money in politics, more money in your pocket, Medicaid for all. That was the answer to everything.
Medicare for all.
Medicare for all, excuse me.
Yeah.
He ran, that was his answer to everything. And I think it's easy to remember what he stands for.
And look, those are 3 winning issues, in my opinion, for Democrats. And those are issues I ran on when I won in a Purple Orange County. And didn't just win my primary, but went on to beat the incumbent Republican. So I actually do think El Sayed is going to pull it out here. And I do think that the fact that he picked those issues, as opposed to some other progressive issues, will put him in a good place when he has to pivot to the general election.
If he's the nominee, we will see whether Medicare for All, a government-run single-payer healthcare system, can be sold in a swing state, which we haven't really tested before. But I will say the starkness of the divide in their coalitions, and you look at the counties, either one wins, they're going to have a lot of work to do to knit together the Democratic Party for November.
And if he wins, selling that to the Senate and getting 60 votes for that.
That's not happening. That's not happening.
Is very challenging.
That'll make
He says he's going to do it on day one, and good luck with that. All right, Katie, Matt, Rob Brownstein, all sticking with us, so we'll get back to you. Still ahead, also, an armed man arrested at one of President Trump's golf clubs just days before the president's visit. What we know about the incident, which happened here in Southern California. We will go to Las Vegas for an update on that. Plus, we continue to follow Michigan's election results. We'll break down what's going on, new numbers constantly coming in throughout the night. Stay with us for more on this very important election night. As we continue to follow election results and we await speeches from both Haley Stevens and Dr. Abdul Sayed, we're going to get some other news in, including this. Authorities here in California announcing that they arrested an armed man outside of President Trump's golf club in Southern California on Sunday, just 2 days before the president visited. The LA County Sheriff's Department says federal agents reported a suspicious person taking photos and videos and appeared to be monitoring security planning activities. The suspect pleaded not guilty to weapons charges on Tuesday. The Secret Service is investigating whether the man posed an actual threat. President Trump landed in California Tuesday evening to attend a Republican National Committee dinner at his Rancho Palos Verdes golf course. He has now left Southern California. He's in the air right now on Air Force One, headed to Las Vegas, where he's set to give a speech in the coming hours. Let's go live to CNN's Kevin Liptak. He's arrived in Las Vegas ahead of the president. Nice view in your hotel room, Kevin. Let's start with news from President Trump. Just within the last hour, he made some comments on Iran on Fox. What did he say?
Yeah, it's interesting because he was actually asked about that man who was arrested in Rancho Palos Verdes, and he sort of pivoted immediately to Iran. I think in his mind, he always has in the back of his head this assassination plot that we know the Iranians have had in mind for quite some time now. And so when he was asked about the arrest, he pivoted almost immediately to Iran and talked about the state of the negotiations that we know are underway right now. Now, President Trump insists that the U.S. is talking to Iran. Iran says that they don't know what he's talking about. They say that they're talking to the Omanis, the Gulf country that's on the other side of the Strait of Hormuz, and they're discussing a plan to try and get that open. And it's clear the president, on the one hand, believes that diplomacy is proceeding, and he seems fairly optimistic that they will come up with an agreement to reopen that waterway soon. He was just talking when he was getting on Air Force One, and he used the time frame of 48 hours. So he seems relatively optimistic that deal to reopen the strait is happening very quickly, but at the same time, threatening this major retaliation if the Iranians walk away from the negotiating table again. Listen to more of what he said.
Iran, as an example, will never have a nuclear weapon. They already can't, but it's going to be formal. The strait's going to be open very soon, or they're going to get hit very hard, and then the strait's going to be open. And we were going to a tremendous attack, the biggest since World War II. And they called me and said, very politely, please, can we talk? Can we talk? They didn't want. And I said, yes, we can talk. Let's get it done. If they back out again, they're going to get hit really hard. They know that. They understand that.
So, Alex, the arrangement talking here, where phase one of the deal is reopening the Strait of Hormuz, phase two of the deal, the two sides are going to talk about the nuclear program. That is literally exactly the same as the memorandum of understanding that the president signed back in June. So he seems to be wanting to get back memorandum of understanding that he himself said was dead, and that he said that the Iranians negotiated in bad faith. So where exactly he sees all of this heading once the strait is reopened, I'm not sure he's exactly clear, but the president confident tonight that something could be happening relatively quickly.
Interesting developments. It'll be interesting to see what he says in the day ahead, or if he even speaks when he lands in Las Vegas. We're monitoring that as well. Kevin Liptak with a great view of the Strat and the Strip. Thanks so much for being with us. Back now to Michigan, where we're keeping a close eye on the hotly contested Democratic Senate primary there. Right now, progressive candidate Abdul El-Sayed is outpacing the more moderate Congresswoman Haley Stevens. That race still too early to call. The outcome will hold major implications for the Democratic Party's identity moving forward, as well as the upcoming November midterms. The winner will face off against former Republican Congressman Mike Rogers in the fight to solidify a congressional majority on Capitol Hill. Let's go live right now to Lansing, Michigan. That's where Zach Gorchow is joining us. He is the president of Michigan Operations at Gongwer. Zach, how do you read the numbers so far, and what do you know about turnout?
Well, I would say right now the surprise is that Haley Stevens is doing well in rural areas, that she, at least as of about an hour ago, was leading in many more counties than Abdul El-Sayed. And going into today, a lot of focus had been put on the effort that the El-Sayed campaign had put on rallies and organizing around the state, and a lot of criticism to the Stevens campaign for not doing that. So to see that she, at least at this hour, is performing, I would say, above expectations in these rural areas is, I think, a big reason why this race is so close right now.
Oftentimes, the national dialogue or nationalization of a race is not what actually is happening when you talk to voters on the ground. There's sometimes themes that get very popular in cable news that are not what people are talking about. When you actually talk to voters, what seems to be driving them?
Well, I would say the kinds of things that seem to be driving voters should help Abdul El-Sayed. It's this sense among Democrats that sending kind of your classic competitive candidate Democrat like a Haley Stevens into a general election, somebody who will try to appeal to the middle, is not good enough anymore, even if they say they're going to fight President Trump, that they want someone who's a disruptor, a flip-the-table person. And that's Abdul El-Sayed. So it's a little surprising that this race is as close as it is. I will say, up until this week, this is about what I expected, a margin of less than 5 points. But there is this big turnout surge. We're probably going to have somewhere on the order of 1.5 million votes in the Democratic primary. That's about 33% bigger than your typical August even year primary turnout in Michigan. And one would think, given the El-Sayed organization, that would have advantaged him, the enthusiasm there. But right now, it's not showing up to the way I would have expected.
Fascinating to hear those numbers, and it'll be fascinating to hear more numbers in the hours ahead, especially as the Detroit area counts. Zach Gorcho, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. We've got more out of Michigan. We are expected to hear from both of the candidates, likely within the next half hour. We will carry their remarks live. Stay with CNN to see it. Welcome back to The Story Is and our special coverage of election night in America. We are keeping a close eye on the Democratic Senate primary in Michigan. We have live pictures right now of both campaign headquarters. You're looking right now on the left is the Haley Stevens headquarters, on the right, the Abdul El-Sayed headquarters. We expect the speeches to begin potentially at the Stevens campaign any moment now. So as soon as that begins, we will go to that picture. In the meantime, Harry Enten, we want to bring you into the conversation. And if I have to interrupt you at some point, I apologize.
I understand.
For being rude. But
you do what you need to do.
Take us to the magic wall. What are you seeing? What numbers coming in right now?
I mean, truthfully, I did not think I'd be up with you at this hour with this race still uncalled. Yeah, I expected the vote count to take this long, but I honestly thought that Abdul El-Sayed was going to do much better than he's doing tonight. Yes, he is ahead. 49.8% to 46.3%, but I was thinking it might be a 5-10 point margin, easy going away. Not the case. Why is it not the case? Well, it all has to do with one county in particular. It is Wayne County, where Detroit is. We can zoom in on it right down here, and let's see if we can do so. There we go. And what do we see in Wayne County? We see that Haley Stevens is ahead by 52% to Abdul El-Sayed's 44%. But more than that, I want you to take a look at this key nugget that I'm pointing out. Hopefully you can see it on your screen. There is 53%, only 53% of the estimated vote reporting. And if there is still vote in Detroit, that is very important. That could allow Haley Stevens to close the gap. But more than that, where else could she potentially be closing that gap? Well, I want to go right back to Southeast Michigan, and I want to go right here to Macomb County. Why is that? Because Abdul El-Sayed is ahead there right now. You can see it by about 10 points, 53.4 to 43.6%. But again, look at the estimated vote that's in so far. It's only 49% of the vote. Now, if there is still early vote to be counted in that county, and I believe that there is, guess who's doing better in the early vote? It is Haley Stevens who is doing better in the early vote. So when you're looking at it right now, yes, you see a race as we look statewide in which you have Abdul El-Sayed ahead 50%, essentially 49.7 to 46.3%, but only 71% of the vote is in, and given what's out there in Wayne County, given what's out there in Macomb County, and given that a lot of Abdul al-Sayed's best territories are in, this is a race that is very, very hot at this particular moment, and one, I don't know if you can tell, Alex, that I'm quite excited to be a part of this evening.
Yeah, we love having you. After Midnight, Harry Enton version is even more excited. And another interesting note that Mallory McMorrow, who dropped out of the race, right now is getting about 3% of the total, which could be the difference in this race as well. Be interesting to follow what happens on that front. We want to bring back our panel right now. Congresswoman Katie Porter, let's start with you as somebody who has spoken on a night like this. Haley Stevens, we expect her to likely speak first. How do you think about something like that, going out to a crowd in terms of crafting a message?
I think that you usually write 3 speeches. You write a win, a lose, and an I don't know. And I've only ever given the I don't knows because it's California. But I think that a lot of this for the candidate is just maintaining your energy, maintaining your momentum. It's stressful. Your staff are keyed up. The audience is keyed up. And I think these are both really talented candidates. And I think they both ran really strong campaigns. So what I want to see from both of them is an acknowledgement of the democratic process at work, a commitment to coming together after this to beat Mike Rogers, and just a lot of thanks to the energy that we're seeing out of Michigan tonight. As a Democrat, I think the energy we're seeing, even if it's being divided relatively evenly between 2 candidates, is good news.
Yeah, because Republican strategist Matt Klink, the opportunity for Republicans is if this deep division, the fact that people are so fired up, isn't healed for the fall. That's good news for Mike Rogers.
Absolutely. You want to hope that Humpty Dumpty cannot put the pieces back together again. I'm sure that the Rogers campaign has ads teed up for both respective winners to highlight the differences in the Democratic Party and to hopefully drive some of those toward Mike Rogers. But yeah, he shouldn't lose a beat once a winner is declared.
You and I talked about this before. If you look at all of the exit polls in Trump's first term in 2018 and 2020, Susan Collins was the only Republican Senate incumbent or challenger who won in a state where his approval rating was net negative. The only one, Susan Collins in 2020. In the Epic MRA poll that came out a couple of days ago that had El-Sayed trailing and Stevens slightly ahead, Trump's disapproval was 63% in Michigan. So, it's going to be tough. I mean, the Democratic Party is divided. Either of them has, obvious issues. El-Sayed, rural voters, black voters, Stevens with young people. But the reality is that Trump's standing has eroded to the point where both of them are going to be competitive. I mean, it's assured this is going to be a competitive race. Can Mike Rogers really win in an environment where 63% of people disapprove of Trump? Maybe. But again, only one person did it in the entire first term.
Mike Rogers couldn't win in 2024 in Michigan when Trump won.
Correct.
He lost by 20,000 votes to Alyssa Slotkin, Congresswoman, who is a more moderate Democrat.
Maybe a more formidable candidate than either of these, though, in a general election.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think these candidates, this has been a tough primary. They have both become, in some ways, more battle-hardened. They've been through a lot. They've shown a lot of grit. Slotkin didn't have to deal with the primary, really, ever, in her House races or in her Senate race. And so I think they come out of the primary, both of them, obviously a little bit tired. They need a little bit of time to recharge. But I think they come out strong, ready to take on
the general election is right around the corner.
It'll be interesting. I mean, look, El-Sayed has been, I think, pretty openly contemptuous of her. I mean, he said AIPAC looked all over the country and found the least capable candidate, anywhere. He said that this week while the polling had him 15 points ahead. And she said, she said this week that he blames all problems in the country on Jewish Americans, essentially accusing him of anti-Semitism. So there's a lot of contention here in the final stages of this campaign. And as we've all said, they've divided the baby really in half. I mean, they really have unraveled the Democratic coalition in the way that Walter Mondale and Gary Hart or somebody would recognize from earlier presidential primaries. But again, when Trump is in this situation, and same thing in Texas and Ohio and Alaska and Iowa, he's under 50 now in all of those. And in his first term, Susan Collins in 2020 is the only Republican who won in a state where he was under 50.
And those are states where you would think that the Democrat would have a harder time, but recent polls seem to indicate that they may not be. We'll talk about that throughout the night. We want to get a quick commercial break in because we expect those speeches to begin at any moment. Stay with us. You're watching Breaking News, Election Night in America, right here on CNN. We continue to follow what's happening in Michigan. We have live pictures, and we are waiting speeches right now from both Haley Stevens and Abdul El-Sayed. They are expected to begin any moment. As soon as they begin, we will bring them to you live. This is a live picture right now from the Stevens campaign. You see folks cheering there. This is a look at the El-Sayed campaign. He said that he would be out before the end of the hour. So as we get closer and as we wait for that, we bring back in our panel right now, Ron Brownstein, Katie Porter, and Matt Klink. Katie Porter, you served in the House with Haley Stevens, and you said she was your freshman class president. What was she like? What was that experience like?
I mean, she's a hard worker. She went right out and recruited us all to vote for her, stepped up to be class president, was always willing to reach out to people, members who were having a hard time, whether it was personal or professional. She's a hustler, and I don't think the fact that she's a moderate, or people are describing her as a moderate, should mask the fact that she's a really hard worker, and she was elected in the class in 2018 that had a lot of energy and a lot of fresh ideas. So I think to paint her as kind of this like part of the gerontocracy is ironic. I was a young member of Congress, and Haley's a good decade younger than me.
You know, they were born 16 months apart, El-Sayed and Haley Stevens, and they are from totally different political generations. I mean, he is, very much a product of the kind of what, they describe as the attention economy politics. I mean,
he calls himself a podcast bro.
Right. He sees his job as kind of engaging with the public. I mean, she is a throwback. I mean, she would be comfortable as a John Dingell or a David Bonyer, to pick two names from Michigan, kind of blue-collar, union.
Those are the names you do for our younger viewers.
Yeah, John Dingell and David Bonyer were classic blue-collar district Democrats who were really focused on kind of lunch bucket issues, didn't really like to talk a lot in public, were much more happy duking it out in closed doors. Dingell against Henry Waxman for 15 years on the Clean Air Act. But, Haley, she's a throwback in that way.
And I don't see it that way. I don't see it as a generational split. I see it as an access split. Haley was somebody who came up through, she worked for Stephen Ratner, she worked for the White House, she worked on the auto restructuring.
She's an old soul.
She was connected to a lot of established politicians. She talked a lot when she ran in 2018 about being part of the Barack Obama administration. And El-Sayed is an outsider.
And that counts.
His family is not in politics. He's not. It's a different legacy, so I don't think it's a
counts against her right now. This is a change election, and if you are an outsider, that's where you want to be.
Yeah.
And I mean, it happened in 2024. It's happening again in 2026. So yeah, I mean, right now she is on the outside.
I guess it's nuts to say that somebody who's been in Congress 8 years.
That's a long time.
Is some kind of like lifelong career politician. I was faulted for only serving 6 years. So what is it that people think is the right amount of
I guess,
and outside?
but there's also sort of an interesting question, Congressman. You've thought a lot about what it means to be a senator when you ran for Senate. In terms of who would be a better senator? I mean, and what is the job? Because it seems like both of them think of the job differently, and they both would probably be very good at doing the job that they think that they should be doing. But how do they see the job differently?
Yeah, so I think two different ideas of the classic sort of older school senatorial idea is this statesperson. I don't like statesman, but the statesperson, the idea of a compromiser, somebody who will talk, who will do the work. And I think what we've seen the Senate shift toward with the filibuster, that's where good ideas go to die from both parties is at the Senate. I think we've seen it shift to being a place where individual politicians make noise and affect the electorate and push out ideas that then come back into the electorate.
El-Sayed's a disruptor. I mean, which right now, that's a good thing to be, whether you're in the House or in the Senate. You want to break things because the system, however you define it, is broken.
Well, and the folks, Ron, that are the kinds of members that she's talking about, the bipartisan compromisers, who, by the way, have written almost every piece of legislation for the last 50 years. When things actually got done in the Senate, these are the people that met. almost all of them have been either voted out of office or retired because they didn't see a path for them.
And even if you're still there, you're not given the lead. You know, John McCain and Ted Kennedy put together coalitions that weren't necessarily supported by the leadership of either side. You know, and you're not allowed to do that anymore. I mean, it just doesn't work. Now, but you know, when I say they're different political generations, even though they're the same age, it's that she does have that conception of the job as someone who kind of rolls up their sleeves and, in a very Waxman-esque way, gets an expansion of Medicaid that benefits, you know, 10,000 working class people.
Incrementalism, which is how you get
he is out there with what I've called the core four of leftist commitments in this election: Medicare for all, abolishing ICE, a wealth tax on assets, not just raising the top rate, and cutting off military aid to Israel. Now, are any of those things going to happen? No. I mean, they're probably not going to happen whether he wins or not, but you know, is the value in being out there advocating for them and changing the debate. That's how he would, I think, conceive of the job. And she would say, you know what, I'm going to reform ICE. You know, I'm going to restore the ACA subsidies. I'm going to restore the cuts in Medicaid. It's just a very different conception of the job.
And young people view this differently because the way that young people get and comprehend information is more to the point. It's not nuanced necessarily.
15 seconds, be very direct.
It drops off after 3 to 4 seconds.
So if you're used to getting a message,
I'm a little older.
Abolish ICE takes 2 seconds to say.
Yeah.
Let's do nuanced ICE reform is not quite a thing. So we're looking at live pictures. Here comes Haley Stevens. Let's listen in. And we see hugs right there as Haley Stevens comes out. A night at the beginning of the day that I think a lot of people, her supporters, thought was probably going to end in a loss. Right now, we're at too close to call, an undecided moment, but a chance for her to thank all of her supporters in the room and in Michigan and around the country who have donated to her and set expectations for the day ahead. Let's listen.
I know it's been an exciting night. I know it's been a long night, because that's the Michigan way. But I want to give you all an update. All right, we knew that this was going to be a close race, and that's exactly what we've got. A close race. We are still waiting on results, and we might not know the results until early in the morning, maybe even later tomorrow. We are still waiting on results from Detroit. We got Keith Williams in the House, the chair of the Michigan Democratic Party Black Caucus. And Keith knows we're also still waiting on results from Flint, Muskegon County, Macomb County. But friends, I am feeling good about this race. I am feeling fired up, and you should be too. But I want to talk about the stakes of this race a minute. We've had a long, hard-fought primary, and we'll know soon who our nominee is going to be. And whoever wins is going to go and take on Mike Rogers. Republicans are going to do everything they can to throw all the dirt, all the mud, the kitchen sink at us, because They want to keep the U.S. Senate red so Mike Rogers can keep rubber stamping Donald Trump's ridiculous agenda, higher prices, 1,000 manufacturing jobs lost nationwide, corruption and abuses of power galore. They want to keep the Senate red so Mike Rogers can go to Washington again and sell us out to the highest bidder and make himself even wealthier. They want to keep, they want to keep the Senate red so Mike Rogers can ban abortion, gut health care, and roll back workers' rights and voting rights. Friends, we are not going to let that happen. So, Michigan, we are not going to know the results for just a little while.
We're with you.
The Congresswoman from West Michigan, everybody. Hillary Scholten. She's the mom of two great boys here, and their future's on the line. So we got to get some sleep or get some coffee. And then we got to be ready to go. We got to wake up and be ready to go, because if we are going to win this thing, which we are, we are going to have to get ready and show Mike Rogers what a little stick it to him looks like. Thank you, friends. See you soon.
Haley Stevens there saying that she's feeling good about the results, that she needs to get some sleep. We're not getting any sleep, though, because we want to see what happens. So you got to stay with this. We are seeing her there with elected members of Congress. Debbie Stabenow there on stage with her, who, of course, has been a Democratic member of the United States Senate from Michigan in the past. She's endorsing her. Gretchen Whitmer also has endorsed her. The governor, Gary Peters, the current senator from Michigan, has endorsed her. Most of the Democratic establishment. So we are awaiting Abdul El-Sayed. When that happens, we will bring it to you live. We're going to get a quick commercial break in. More election results when we come back. Dr. Abdul El-Sayed speaking right now in Detroit. Let's listen.
Right now, we are on track to vastly outvote the historical numbers that we should have expected. And that tells you about the kind of movement that we were able to inspire. Movement that kicked off 15 months ago, traveling the state up and down, spending time in churches in Detroit and living rooms in Lansing, VFW halls in Escanaba, backyards in Grand Rapids, sometimes in rooms of 2 or 3, sometimes in rooms of 2 or 3,000. And I will tell you this, I want you just to reflect on what that means. Right now, we are on track to vastly outvote the historical numbers that we should have expected. And that tells you about the kind of movement that we were able to inspire. A movement that kicked off 15 months ago, traveling the state up and down, spending time in churches in Detroit and living rooms in Lansing, VFW halls in Escanaba, backyards in Grand Rapids, sometimes in rooms of 2 or 3, sometimes in rooms of 2 or 3,000. And across that movement that we built, there was an inspiration in the idea that we could take our government back. Government of the people, by the people, and for the people, instead of government of the corporations, by the special interests, and for the billionaires. And because you had the audacity to believe in that, you know that the billionaires, the corporations, and the special interests, they weren't going to give up lightly. We all knew they were going to spend their money. We didn't know they were going to spend $70 million of their money. We didn't know that they were going to outspend us $11 to $1. and yet we're still standing. They want to tell us that here in Michigan, we're a purple state. That somehow everybody walks around wondering, I wonder where I stand on a left-right spectrum. When really, up and down the state, what you hear is, I wonder how I can afford my rent. I wonder how I can afford my groceries. I don't know what will happen if I get sick because I can't afford my deductible. We are not a purple state. We are a state in need of a movement to take our politics back. And despite their spending, despite their lies told in ad after ad after ad after ad on TV, we're walking into the rest of this evening with a 3-point lead. And so as folks ask, if and when we win this race, how are you going to beat Mike Rogers and their money? I want you to remind them that if we come through this, when we come through this, inshallah, that we'll have taken $70 million on the chin and kept fighting back. But I also want to speak to this moment. We've got 13 weeks to defeat Mike Rogers. And however we might feel about the campaign we've just come through, I want you to understand that it pales in comparison to the cynicism, in comparison to the corporatism, in comparison to the lies that Mike Rogers and Donald Trump are going to tell. There is so much more that unites us. However much we might disagree with our Democratic opponent, there is so much more that unites us than divides us. And so, to all of our supporters here tonight, watching on TV, tomorrow we begin to mend fences. Whatever happens tonight, we have a responsibility to assure that we unite to make sure that Mike Rogers never sees the inside of the U.S. Senate. And I'm going to ask, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm going to ask all of us, as we think about where we go from here, always magnanimity in victory. So if your instinct is to be like, I told you, no. Let's come together to build a movement that's even bigger, that's even stronger, that's even more powerful, that reaches into the very depths of this state, that reminds us the best of who we are and who we can be. That is the commitment I want all of us to be making as we leave here tonight. And so, Mike, and I know you're listening, Mike, we are coming for you. I just gotta tell you, I was in med school while Mike Rogers was in Congress. This is a guy who's never seen a check from a pharmaceutical lobbyist he didn't want to cash. He sent our campaign a cease and desist for calling him a pharma lobbyist. But I don't know if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, smells like a duck, How am I supposed to know it's a goose? So look, forgive me, Mike. I just know that you spend so much time with pharma lobbyists, I just thought you were one. You've taken so much money for them to raise our prescription drug prices. I just thought that you just got in the business. After all, you haven't really explained how you made $14 million golfing in Florida. Unless it was trading on all the government relationships you built when you were in Congress. So I don't know, maybe 14 million wasn't enough. You got to come back, get some more relationships and trade on them too? This is a guy who has never seen a check from a corporation he did not want to corrupt himself with. And here's the thing about it. He can't decide which era of Republican he wants to be from. On the one hand, he was from the neocon era that had us fighting unnecessary wars in Iraq, swore up and down he could never support Donald Trump, then went to Mar-a-Lago when he decided to run for Senate the first time, and licked all the boots until he finally got that Trump endorsement. So he's both the worst of the neocon era and the worst of the MAGA era, and I just think that's the worst of all. Because at least you should know who you are. But I promise you, Mike, by the time we are done with you, all of Michigan is going to know who you are. You are a corporate sellout who's not a pharma lobbyist, but really, really might want to be one someday, who voted to raise our prescription drug prices, who supported wars we don't need to fight, who tried to shut down our bridges, who wants to stand in the way of our unions, who should never see the inside of the U.S. Senate. So friends, we're going to have to wait a little longer to see the outcome of this race. But as I look in front of me, I already see the outcome of this campaign. A community of people who came together around a set of ideals, built on the foundation of what this government was supposed to be in the first place. Government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And as I think about where we sit in the long arc of our history, it's hard not to reflect on the fact that we just commemorated 250 years. And we all know those 250 years weren't perfect. We all know that a lot of that history was built on a set of foundational errors. And at the same time, I can't help but appreciate the fact that I know what America gave me. America is an incredible place. I used to live the contrapositive of the life I was supposed to live when I'd spend summers in Egypt. I crossed 15 hours and 10 years difference in life expectancy. But for the accident of being born here, I got the opportunity to get vaccinated against diseases that killed 2 of my aunts and uncles that I otherwise never met. I got to go to amazing public schools. I got to go to an incredible public university. I got my medical education paid for by the NIH. And at the same time, growing up just 15 minutes away from me, children whose families had been here far longer than mine who never got those same opportunities. America can do glorious things, but to love America isn't just to dress up in some colors and pretend that everything's fine. To love America is to will America to do the hard work of being better. If you love America, you want America to be America for all of her kids. And as I think about those past 250 years, those errors, slavery, Jim Crow, the fact that this country was built without giving women equal access to citizenship for years. Continued discrimination against people. The thing our country has always done better than anyone else is that we've been able to look those failures in the eye and correct them. It's not because we ignore our challenges. The greatness of America is the ability to see those challenges and fix them. And 250 years on, as we think about where we go from here, it is that ability to correct that we together have embraced in this movement. We live in an era of historical inequality, in an era where union participation is near an all-time low, but the number of billionaires has never been higher. An era where schools continue to carry the consequences of historical segregation. An era where we continue to see a few very small people try to define America as being as small as they are. We can't control the past 250 years. What we can do is build the next 250. And to do that, it's going to mean movements like this one, of the people, by the people, and for the people, with a distinct purpose of taking on the challenges that we face. Those movements have never been more important than they are right now. I look in front of me and I see all kinds of colors, all kinds of stories coming together around the idea that we can have nice things, we just can't do it alone. That to have them, we're going to need to reach across the divides they tell us we can't breach. Divides of race, of faith, of geography, of sexual orientation, gender identity, to build together what we want to hand off to our kids and our grandkids. And for the past 15 months, I've had the privilege of being a part of that movement with all of you. And so as we continue forward, for the next 13 weeks, I am asking you to put your shoulder in the work to make sure that we defeat Mike Rogers, we defeat and send a blow to Trumpism, and we do the work of building that next 250 years that all of us deserve, because at some point, whether you know them or you don't, the future will ask you, what did you do in this moment? For me, it looks like two little girls, ethnically half Indian like their mom, ethnically half Egyptian like me, 100% American. And I want to tell them, when they ask, that I got to work with so many incredible people who believed in the best of America, so that we could hand it off to them and all of their kids and grandkids. Ask yourself what we could be if we treated all our kids like they were all our kids. Ask yourself what it would mean when it comes to where we spend our tax dollars, about the schools we build, the health care we provide, the opportunities we would want. And for the next 13 weeks and the next 6 years after that, I'm asking you to join me in helping to build that America. So with that, we should know who the victor will be tomorrow. And the work starts anew. And so for one last time for this primary, money out of? Money in your? Medicare for? Let's go win. Thank you so much.
Dr. Abdul El-Sayed speaking there in Detroit. His speech, almost 17 minutes long, much different than when we heard from Haley Stevens, who was about 5 minutes long. Arlette Saenz is in the room. Arlette, what was your big takeaway from what we just heard?
Abdul El-Sayed really used his speech tonight as an attempt to thank and talk about the movement within the progressive part of the Democratic Party that has helped fuel his campaign. But he also made a very critical plea to the the Democratic Party to unite after what has been an incredibly divisive contest. Abdul El-Sayed acknowledged that it might still be many hours until this race is called, but he said that no matter who wins tonight, that Democrats need to get behind their chosen nominee. It comes as we've really seen a very personal and bruising battle play out between Abdul El-Sayed, the progressive in this contest, who is running against the more moderate candidate, Congresswoman Haley Stevens. She also, in her remarks a bit earlier, they were much shorter than El-Sayed's, but she did acknowledge that whoever wins will be ready to take on Mike Rogers, the Republican nominee, in November. So now there's going to be a lot of questions going forward. One, we need to learn who will emerge as the winner from this Democratic primary, but then there are very real questions about the work ahead to ensure that Democrats can unite if they want to have a chance of beating Rogers in this critical midterm contest. El-Sayed also devoted a large portion of his speech to go after Rogers, perhaps signaling that that might have been something he would have talked about if he was able to declare victory this evening. He really talked about the way that they want to paint Rogers in this campaign, arguing that he would be a stamp for President Donald Trump and his policies in Washington. I also thought it was notable that El-Sayed said that he doesn't think that Michigan is a purple state. Michigan has swung between parties in the past few presidential elections. Trump won in 2024, Biden in 2020, Trump in 2016. So this very much still is a swing state, but what El-Sayed is trying to argue is that voters in this state aren't thinking about ideology, they're thinking about how to solve some of the issues like pocketbook issues, affordability issues that they are confronting in this campaign. So that could be a way that he tries to frame this if he does continue on to the general election, where he would need to appeal to a wider swath of voters. But Alex, campaign officials from both teams certainly will continue to watch this data as it comes in overnight, hoping that their candidate will emerge as the victor. But Democrats here in the state will have to wait just a little bit longer to learn who that will be.
Well, Arlette, as you stay with us, I want to bring up some of that data. And as El-Sayed was speaking, the race kept getting closer. The longer his speech went, the worse the numbers went for him. We're now at 48.9 for El-Sayed, 47.1 for Stevens. This race is still too early to call. There is definitely a path for Stevens. And this is interesting, Arlette, because in the last few days, some polls, including some that frankly aren't that reliable, had shown perhaps a double-digit victory for El-Sayed. That was the way a lot of people were coming into today. What are you hearing from the supporters there? Are they surprised at how close this thing is? Was there an expectation walking into this event that this thing would already be over a few hours ago?
Well, El-Sayed's supporters had been hoping that this race would have been called much earlier than it's actually going to be. One thing that his campaign had acknowledged heading into tonight is that Wayne County, as we know, is very slow to count votes. So they had always included that potential caveat that maybe this could drag out a bit longer, but there had really been a major sense of enthusiasm within El-Sayed's campaign in recent days and weeks, and they thought that this might be being called a bit earlier than it will be. So we will see exactly how that shakes out. But one thing that we've seen in some of the data coming in for Haley Stevens is that she has been doing quite well with the mail-in vote. The absentee voting ran for quite an extended period of time here in Michigan. And so El-Sayed was really hoping to drive up especially the numbers in turnout on election day. But we'll see how this all begins to shake out. Its potential, it could tighten, it could expand. There's a lot of votes still to be counted here in the critical battleground in Michigan.
Arlette, thank you. Our colleague Harry Enton is breaking all those numbers down at the Magic Wall. He joins us next when we come back, and a little later we rejoin our panel. A lot to break down in what we just heard, but new numbers when we come back. Welcome back to The Story Is, our special coverage of election night in America. We've got new numbers coming in by the minute out of Michigan. CNN's chief data analyst Harry Enton with us live right now. As you see where we're at, Abdul El-Sayed at 48.9, Haley Stevens not far behind at 47.1. Since we spoke to you, Harry, about an hour ago, she is closing the gap.
I got the vapors. I got the vapors in here, my dear friend Alex. I mean, this race is closer. I mean, it is closer than two cars together during rush hour traffic in either Los Angeles or New York City, or perhaps outside of Detroit, if we're talking about Michigan here. You know, this is the name of the game, right? You were talking about it when Abdul El-Sayed started his speech. He was leading by 3. Now the lead is under 2 points. He's only ahead. I know the number is small on the screen right here, by a little bit less than 33,000. The last time, 23,000, excuse me. The last time we spoke, that number was 37,000. And more than that, Haley Stevens absolutely has a path to victory, because what are we talking about? What is the name of the game? We spoke about it last hour. It's Wayne County. It's Detroit. And if we go down there to Detroit, what you can see right now, 2 key nuggets to keep in mind. Number one, Haley Stevens is ahead in Wayne County, 52% to a little bit less than 45%, 69% of the estimated vote in. Ergo, there's still 31% of the estimated vote still out. Detroit, where Haley Stevens is doing particularly well within Wayne County, also still has vote out. Plenty of it. She's doing very well downtown Detroit, doing very well with African-American voters. Now, if we were to go one county north, this is another county we've been keeping our eyes out on, right? Macomb County. The last time we spoke, this was your lighter Columbia shade of blue because Abdul El-Sayed was ahead. Now it is, in fact, a dark navy blue. Why is that? Because Haley Stevens is now out ahead in Macomb County, still got 25% of the vote there. More than that, as we zoom out on your map here, and again, you see the bottom line here, 2 little things I want to know, or 3 little things. Number one, still 17% of the vote still out. We have only 83% of the vote in. Number 2, you pointed it out last hour. The candidate not here is the candidate that dropped out of the race but still on the ballot. McMorrow, she's getting 4% of the vote. The margin right now, significantly less than that. Quite the story that'll be if this holds. The last thing I will note is if I hit my doodad pretty well here, here's what I want to know. All night long, this is tracking the vote, all night long, what has been going on? Well, Abdul El-Sayed has pretty much been ahead all night long, but you can see, Alex, almost like a shark, what you see is Haley Stevens getting closer and closer and closer and closer and closer, and now we're less than 2 points. Will she actually close in and get her fish? We'll have to wait and see.
Oh, man, we need the Jaws theme to be your backing music. Harry Enton.
Done it.
There we go. Don't too much, because we can't afford the music rights.
I know, just a little bit.
Just a little. Harry Enton hanging out with us late into the night. We just can't wait to see what he's going to do next as we continue to follow those numbers throughout the evening. Up next, our panel is back after the break to talk about everything we just witnessed. They have very strong reactions to very different speeches from El-Sayed and Stevens, and what both of their speeches say about them and what they might be like in the Senate. We continue to watch that number get closer and closer. We continue to follow breaking news out of Michigan. Hotly contested Democratic Senate primary there. It keeps getting closer. Progressive candidate Abdul El-Sayed barely ahead right now of Haley Stevens. The race is still too early to call. Our panel is back. It was interesting. We just heard speeches from both of them. Very different speeches. One was over 16 minutes. The other one was 5 minutes. The visuals were very different. Here's part of what Haley Stevens had to say.
They want to keep the Senate red so Mike Rogers can ban abortion, gut health care, and roll back workers' rights and voting rights. Friends, we are not going to let that happen.
That's her take on Mike Rogers. Here's some of what Abdul El-Sayed said.
Let's come together to build a movement that's even bigger, that's even stronger, that's even more powerful, that reaches into the very depths of this state, that reminds us the best of who we are and who we can be. That is the commitment I want all of us to be making as we leave here tonight.
Congresswoman, as the only person on this panel that's actually given one of these speeches, your thoughts on clearly very different approaches?
Yeah, I mean, I think Stevens was talking to Democratic voters. Voters who know where they are on things like abortion, on things like voters' rights. I think the strongest part of El-Sayed's speech was when he was talking to the purple voter, the voter who might be considering Mike Rogers. And he's saying, listen, Mike Rogers, the rent's too high. Mike Rogers, you can't afford to put food on the table for your kids. Mike Rogers, not a brighter future for America. So I think that opening part of El-Sayed's speech, where he's talking to purple voters and really tried to say to people who might be considering Mike Rogers, come on in. And in a way, what Stevens was just saying is, listen, if you're basically okay with core Democratic stuff, voting rights, for example, things some Republicans used to even support, abortion rights, come on in and vote for us. So I think they were talking to different people.
From a strategy perspective, Matt, which one made more sense?
Clearly, the first speaker, she was Haley Stevens was excellent. I think that, well, one, she was short. I think that she was very focused. She created a nice contrast. Mike Rogers equals Donald Trump equals my opponent. The second speaker, Dr. El-Sayed, I mean, look, the guy loves to hear himself talk. Yeah. He's a dynamic speaker, but I don't know if the purple voter, and certainly no Republican voter, is going to talk about a movement. I mean, he is catering to the extreme
and they're not
left of the Democratic Party.
And look, it's a different vision. I mean, he is very much in that Bernie Sanders constellation kind of vision of politics, that you're going to inspire this movement to transform the country, transform the electorate. Implicit in that is that there's this vast pool of non-voters that you're going to inspire. I mean, that has really proved very difficult very hard to do. And I thought that, like, she was just basically, we're going to win this election.
Yes.
Like, we're not going to transform the country. We're like, we're going to get more votes than Mike Rogers in November, and we're going to have one less votes for Republicans, and therefore we can restore the ACA subsidies. Yeah. It's just kind of like there's a grandiosity in the presentation of kind of the El-Sayed and many of the Bernie-style candidates. And look, that's what they think they can do.
Well, as you were speaking, we got even more new numbers, and it got even closer. So Haley Stevens continues to make up that margin. And one thing you pointed out, Congresswoman, as we were watching that was interesting, was that during El-Sayed's speech, we kept seeing presumably his digital director,
100%
standing in the camera shot, getting great hero shots of him from behind. Now, the old school way of doing this, you're more focused on the TV cameras in front, because that's the audience, how they get information, so you would never do that. You'd be fired for doing something like that. For his campaign, it's a plus.
Yeah, well, and I mean, he was up there alone, which also put the focus squarely on him. And she did the kind of more traditional thing of surrounding herself with two currently elected, Debbie Stabenow, right, former senator, with Hillary Schulten, sitting congresswoman. She grabs Schulten's kids and is like, look, I care about the future. It just was, I think, very, very different styles.
Content creation is key. I mean, the guys behind, the camera moves a little bit. It's very edgy. They're going to be quick clips that are going to highlight certain key phrases. That's the new way.
Look, and there are benefits to it, right? I mean, he excites a lot of young people. Look at Ann Arbor. I mean, that county, how big. But, there are a lot of, in all of these states, these are older states. They're heavily non-college states. There are not a lot of people who are watching edgy videos. And ultimately, you may not have to win non-college whites to win Michigan as a Democrat anymore, but you got to stay competitive. Right. And that's going to be a big challenge for him if he ultimately is the nominee.
Older people vote.
Well, and I will say, though,
real quickly,
the electorate is younger in the general, and it's bigger in the general. So I will say, I think, to your point, Sayed was talking to an electorate that I'm not sure is tuning in on Democratic primary night.
Yeah, but they might be watching his social media tomorrow.
Correct. That's right.
All right, more with you guys and more from Michigan when we come back. Our special coverage, Election Night in America, continues, and it seems like every other minute we're getting new numbers, so stay with us. I promise that we're getting new numbers every other minute. We just got new numbers within the last minute or so. Actually, good numbers for Abdul El-Sayed. First time that we'd seen that in a while to help expand his lead. Right now, you see he is ahead by over 21,000 votes.
I guess it's people always focus on that 1% difference, and they get really excited. They say they're 1% away, but 21,000 votes is a lot of humans. That a lot of votes you got to find.
Yes, indeed. We want to go to Michigan right now. Chad Livengood is the politics editor and columnist for the Detroit News. He joins us now to dive deeper into all of this. You know this state so well. In terms of the vote that's outstanding and the makeup of it, do you see a path for Stevens? Do you think there are enough votes out there for her to get there?
It does look like there is a path still. There's about 27% of the votes have not been counted yet in Wayne County, particularly in Detroit and some of the first-ring suburbs. Dearborn is a big key area as well, key for Abdul El-Sayed. But Wayne County and Detroit in particular were always going to be favored to Haley Stevens, even though Abdul was most recently the Wayne County Public Health Director. He was once Detroit's Public Health Director. He's got a lot of connections from his 2018 campaign for governor in the city. So I wouldn't count him out here, but right now she's got about a comfortable 6-point lead in Wayne County, and if that gets much more wider. It's going to be pretty close and maybe leaning towards her favor. There are a couple other key areas around the state that are still votes have not been come in yet. Calhoun County around Battle Creek, home of Kellogg's cereal, that is still not still just 41% of the vote there, and there's a few other just sporadic areas that we're waiting to see what the results are. Genesee County, Flint area, still a little under 80% of the vote counted there. Haley Stevens has a lead there, but it's not it's not firm. Sure. And we're, again, we're kind of waiting to see what the last precincts out of Flint look like, because El-Sayed was just recently just in Flint over the weekend or last weekend, and trying to really make some inroads there. So
you've been out talking to voters, getting a sense of what was driving them. What stood out to you in terms of actually hearing from voters?
There is a lot of distrust in institutions right now, from government to our utility companies. And particularly DTE Energy, the electric company in Detroit, has had a spotty record as of late when it comes to every time the wind blows in the state. It seems like a lot of people's power goes out. Abdul El-Sayed has just been railing on this company and used this against Haley Stevens, because she's taken thousands of dollars of DTE corporate PAC money over the years, and really kind of tried to basically energize a lot of people on this subject. Not a lot of subjects get, as much as he focused on APAC, it kind of at the end here, he came in on DTE. And coming in on DTE resonates a lot better with people who aren't necessarily already in his corner. And so, that was one. That in data centers, there's been a big upheaval on data centers. Lots of moratoriums, recall efforts, and such. And so, DTE is linked directly at the hip of the data center hyperscalers. And so, Abdul and some of the other progressive candidates on the ballot. In the 13th congressional, 7th congressional, they have been really honed in on data centers.
It's interesting because, of course, the national media spending so much time talking about issues like Israel, but for voters, when it comes to making their mind up, the local power company could be the thing that makes their mind up one way or another. So thank you for giving us that perspective from the ground. I know you're probably not sleeping, so we appreciate you staying up late with us on a very exciting night in the history of Michigan politics. Stay with us. As we mentioned, we're getting all sorts of new numbers every single minute, it seems. We'll hopefully have more when we come back, including more from our panel. All right, I promised new numbers from Michigan, and we got them. The latest numbers are good for Abdul El-Sayed. He is now up about 25,000, but it is still too early to call this race. As we prepare to wrap up this hour and head into the next hour, Matt Klink, the biggest thing you're looking for in the hour or two ahead?
It's just where those votes are in Wayne County. It says, I mean, the number is important, but it's where the votes are, because if it's inner city Detroit, Haley Stevens has got to be very, very happy. But if it's in other places, she's probably not going to be happy.
Congressman.
I'm looking at how many votes are left, just the raw number of votes left. We're up to 89% of the vote counted. You know, right now, 25,000 lead. There's probably, maybe 100,000 votes out there. You got to really have a big gap for Stevens to get there.
Ron.
You know, I'm just kind of wondering how they put the party back together after an election that has divided it so cleanly and so consistently across the state. But I will note that, you know, Donald Trump's disapproval is such that either of these candidates can win in Michigan in the end.
Yeah, and so we will talk in the next hour about both of their strategies for bringing the party together, which both seem a little bit different as well. Plus, as we see, we keep getting more and more numbers, and we'll see if it's possible in the next hour that maybe we have a call. Depending on how quickly those Wayne County votes come in. If we get a big slash of those, we may have a better sense in terms of picking a winner in this race. So we are doing overtime of The Story Is. Usually this is when I say good night, but now I say see you when we come back for more of Election Night in America. Welcome to an extended special edition of The Story Is. I'm Alex Michelson, live in Los Angeles, continuing our special coverage of Election Night in America. It's 11 p.m. here in Los Angeles. It is now 2 a.m. in Detroit, Michigan, where we are following a very close race. It's not the only race of the night. 5 states have been holding primaries to determine who will face off in the November midterm elections, with control of Congress at stake. Voters going to polls in Missouri, Kansas, Virginia, Washington State. But right now, so much of the focus of the country is on the battleground of Michigan. More than 85% of the votes are in for the state's Democratic Senate primary. We just got new numbers literally as this graphic was updating. It is still too soon to tell who will win. Right now, we see Abdul El-Sayed at 49%, Haley Stevens at 47%. Perhaps more important than those percentages is the actual vote total. Right now, Abdul El-Sayed ahead by about 28,000 votes. Both candidates speaking to supporters within the last hour or so. Here's what what they said.
We've had a long, hard-fought primary, and we'll know soon who our nominee is going to be. And whoever wins is going to go and take on Mike Rogers. Republicans are going to do everything they can to throw all the dirt, all the mud, the kitchen sink at us, because they want to keep the U.S. Senate red, so Mike Rogers can keep rubber stamping Donald Trump's ridiculous agenda.
To build a movement that's even bigger, that's even stronger, that's even more powerful, that reaches into the very depths of this state, that reminds us the best of who we are and who we can be. That is the commitment I want all of us to be making as we leave here tonight.
Joining us now live is CNN's chief data analyst, Harry Enten. You know it is a special occasion when Harry Enten is up at 2 o'clock in the morning because there are new numbers coming in, seemingly by the second. Harry, how do we break things down in terms of where we're at right now?
Alex, I just want to note I was looking at a fake watch on my hand. I have never worn a watch. I am not my father. I am not Judge Enten. I am merely Harold, not Harold. But Harry, not Harold. But I will just say, At 2 o'clock in the morning, who really knows here in the East what is real and what is fugazi? But look, here's the situation. I think you pointed it out really quite well, which is it's not just the percentages, it is the raw vote. We'll talk about the percentages first. What we're talking about is Abdul El-Sayed had 49% to 47%. And what we're also talking about in percentages is the percentage of the estimated vote in and how much is left. The percentage of the vote estimated in, well, we just went up a percentage point. We were at 89%. Now we're at 90%. And that spread between El-Sayed and Stevens has remained the same, 2 points. But more than that, it's the raw vote, as you were hinting at. Right now, what we're talking about in terms of the raw vote is we're talking about a lead of about 28,000, a little bit more than 27,000, right in between the two of them. Why is that important? Because at its closest point in the last few hours, we got down to a spread in which Abdul El-Sayed was ahead by 22,000. Ergo, the lead in raw vote has, in fact, been climbing. And that, of course, is a big problem because as the more votes you get in, you want that gap to be shrinking. It is, in fact, going up a bit. That is part of the good news for Abdul El-Sayed. There's a bit more good news. You know, we have been talking so much about the great importance of Wayne County, right? Wayne County is where Detroit is. What we see is the estimated vote there is also climbing. We are now up to 81% of the estimated vote. And when we were first starting off, and I was first here, Wayne to go on, we were in the 50s, maybe the low 60s. Now we're talking about 81% of the estimated voted. More than that, the spread between Haley Stevens and Abdul El-Sayed has been closing in Wayne County. Now we're only talking about a 4-point spread. We're only talking about 10,000 votes. Now, obviously, if there's more of Detroit to be counted, which we believe that there, in fact, is more of Detroit vote, she'll do better there. But when you're talking about countywide, a spread of only about 10,000 votes, and then we're talking about statewide, a spread of 25,000 votes, well, if there's only 20% of the votes still in Wayne County, still to be counted in Wayne County, that is a big problem because that would suggest she'd have to Haley Stevens would have to vastly outperform what she is doing so far in Wayne County. More than that, I want to take you to my favorite graphic. We spoke about it last hour. I was able to hit the button despite the fact that I sometimes have a shaky hand. Let's see if I can do it again. Let's see. Yes, I did it again. Okay, this is the vote over time. You know, before we were talking about the Jaws theme and how it was getting closer and closer and closer. Well, now it's getting a little bit wider. But more than that, my dear friend, I think what's so important to note as we look at the spread over time, Columbia blue, of course, being El-Sayed, and then we have that nice darker, closer to navy blue. I'm not exactly a painter, so I don't want to get the exact shade of blue wrong here. But what I think is so notable is that the two lines really have never crossed. Abdul El-Sayed has led throughout this entire evening, and as we get up to closer to 89, 90% of the vote, you have to ask yourself, is there enough vote out there for Haley Stevens? The answer to that question is yes, but as she's not been able to cross that threshold, I do have to wonder whether or not the math is really there for her, my friend.
Well, it's interesting, Harry, as you were speaking, she closed the gap by 3,000 votes because it started when you started speaking, you were around 28,000. Now we're at about 25,000. So your little presentation was good for her. So we'll see.
It's one of those things. We just have to wait and see all the votes to be counted. But again, what I really would like to see if I'm her, get this thing inside of 20,000 votes, get it inside where you can get those late votes in from Detroit, and then you really might have something. But until that point, it's advantage El-Sayed. But again, there's a reason why we haven't called anything just quite yet.
I just want to say, Harry, as a Californian, it's amazing that people count overnight. This idea.
Who knew? Who knew? We don't take.
Yeah, that we could be getting more numbers because that doesn't happen very much out here. So we appreciate.
I would just end by saying this. Imagine if the election were this close out in California. We might not find out who wins until Hanukkah. That's all I would say.
Happy Hanukkah to you and to everybody that's watching. Harry Enten, thank you so much for all of that.
Thank you, my friend.
We want to go now live to Detroit. Matthew Miller, senior reporter with MLive.com, is literally standing outside the El Sayed event. So thank you for joining us after being inside reporting. First, just take us inside that room and sort of the feeling from inside there. And is there disappointment from folks that maybe expected this thing would be over by now?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of impatience tonight. People, Dr. El Sayed began with a substantial lead in the terms of the votes counted, and that lead was just kind of whittled away steadily all night long. And so he addressed his supporters at around 1 a.m., telling them, telling them it was gonna have to wait until morning, most likely, and also telling them, or taking the time to congratulate them on building a kind of movement that a lot of folks would have said wasn't possible.
From the ground, in terms of talking to voters, in terms of your experience out with folks, what was sort of the issue that drove people the most? And is it some of these big national issues, or is it something more local?
I think the folks who are most keenly supporting Dr. El Sayed are people who believe that American politics is broken, that it's so deformed by the vast sums of money that go into elections like this one, that it doesn't, it's no longer capable of serving the needs of average voters, average people.
And in terms of one of the things that he talked about, just to wrap things up, this idea of trying to bring the party back together. We know he has said a lot of things, especially about Haley Stevens, that have been, aggressive. In terms of how tall a task is that, this idea of bringing the Democratic Party back together?
It's going to depend on who wins, of course. I know that there are folks who are Haley Stevens supporters who have said they would feel uncomfortable voting for El Sayed. Hillary Scholten, who's a congresswoman from Michigan, has said he, has sort of gave her an un-American vibe, something along those lines. But I think both campaigns at least paid lip service tonight to the notion that the Democrats are going to need to come together to defeat Mike Rogers, the Republican nominee, and that whatever their differences are, that they do not, that their differences with the Republicans are more.
Matthew Miller, thank you for reporting after 2 o'clock in the morning. I know it's been a long day and a long few weeks of coverage, and we appreciate you joining us from outside the El Sayed event. Our political panel is back. Ron Brownstein, CNN senior political analyst, opinion columnist at Bloomberg. Matt Klink, a Republican strategist and owner and president of Klink Campaigns Incorporated, and former Democratic Congresswoman Katie Porter, all of them with us, although Ron looking especially good in that shot there. And I think you've got some, we need Ron more FaceTime for that. What you got new information?
Well, no, I'm just looking back at the exit poll from 24. There's a lot of focus on whether Democrats can come back together in this race. And given the Trump, the way the Democrats view the Trump administration as an existential threat to everything they care about, maybe they will. That can't win the race in Michigan. I mean, Michigan is not a state you can win by base mobilization. In the 2024 exit poll, Democrats were 31% of the voters, Republicans were 34%, Independents were 35%. Democrats will probably outvote Republicans in this election. They're more energized. But nonetheless, you probably have to win or stay very competitive among independents to win this race. And that is kind of the real issue. If El Sayed is the nominee, can he reach beyond the kind of the Sanders vision of the movement? And there are strengths in that. He's bringing out a lot of young people. He's going to be very strong with college-educated voters. Can he remain competitive in white working-class Michigan, which is an awful lot of voters there?
I think you're shaking your head.
No, I think that Mike Rogers' team is going to carve up El Sayed pretty good. It's going to be a really ugly race, probably a race to the bottom. I don't know how El Sayed can get back anywhere close to middle when you talk about movements and the things that he talks about. He's positioned himself on the fringe of the Democratic Party, and I think that the Republicans are going to drive that home over and over and over again.
Congresswoman.
Katie disagrees.
It's not the French. The man is a poised to win in a swing state. It's not the fringe. This is half.
He
fully
lost half the Democrats.
Yes, so did Stevens.
Right, that
so
is the problem.
my point
I mean, that
is,
is the
so
problem.
did Stevens.
And very distinct.
So you can't characterize it as the fringe when it's fully half in a purple state like Michigan. I would say, to your point about Michigan being about a third Democrats, about a third independents, and about a third Republicans. That's what Orange County was, give or take, when I ran there. And I will just say, I think the biggest myth in establishment Democratic politics is that swing voters, that independent voters don't care about things like Medicare for all. They don't care about getting money out of politics. In fact, they care more about those things than base Democratic voters, who are often wed to the establishment they have.
Well, isn't it also passable, Matt, that he brings out new voters? I mean, a lot of people thought that Donald Trump couldn't win, and then he brought out a bunch of people who were animated in his base, and he expanded his own base. I mean, couldn't El Sayed activate people who didn't feel impassioned by the Democratic establishment?
It's very expensive to do that. Donald Trump had the money. El Sayed does not.
But does he need it? He just lost. I mean, AIPAC spent against him $70 million.
He does to turn out voters, you need money. Else, he got money spent against him in negative ads, but to get people to educate them and encourage them to turn out, that's very time-consuming and very expensive.
Mobilization is expensive.
He'll get a solid youth. I mean, if he is the nominee, he will inspire more youth turnout than she would. But it's an older state. It's like hard to win that way. Ultimately, you have to be competitive with the electorate that exists. A majority of the voters, or at least roughly half the voters in Michigan, are going to be whites without a college degree. That was not a good constituency for him in the primary. There are obvious cultural issues, defunding the police. I mean, there are a lot of places Republicans are going to go. Having said all that, I just go back to kind of the basics. Donald Trump's disapproval in Michigan is 60%. Yeah. No Republican won in his first term in a state where his disapproval was that high.
I mean, part of the conversation, Congresswoman, has been over this concept of electability and some frustration, especially from El Sayed supporters, that the most electable person isn't always elected. You look at Hillary Clinton, there was talk about her being the most electable and Joe Biden being the most electable, and sometimes you ended up with a candidate where there wasn't a lot of passion behind them. Is it time to rethink this concept of who is electable?
Yeah, I hate this concept because I think who is electable is who is actually getting elected. Yeah. So you can talk all you want about how you don't think Sayed is electable. Take a look at the number on your screen. He is actually, I believe, tomorrow morning, going to get elected. And you know what that means? That means he's electable.
No, but this is the undercard. I mean, the primary is the undercard. I mean, even the supporters. I was talking today to the person who runs the Progressive Change Campaign Committee, the Elizabeth Warren Group, and they said, look, this is our proof of concept. We've been arguing for years that if you let us, you give us the nomination with these economic populists in a swing state, we can win. Now we actually have to go out and do it. And look, and you have Jocelyn Benson.
Not in a state like Vermont.
Not in a state like Vermont.
Not in a state like Massachusetts.
Right. Or in a district, the commie corridor in New York City, as they call it. It's not my phrase. But look, Jocelyn Benson, the governor, is probably going to win substantially. So, the governor candidate for the Democrats, can he stay within 7 or 8 points of her if he is the nominee and get by? That's entirely possible.
And can you see them campaigning together?
I can't. Look, I think they both were very clear. One thing we talked about, their speeches were very different in tone and length. But one thing they both were very strong and very consistent on, and I found them both stylistically different, but to be emotionally believable and genuine in saying, we will come together to beat Mike Rogers.
Yeah, and to Mike Rogers, Matt, is the danger for him that he looks like, especially if he's running against El Sayed, the establishment candidate
100%.
in a year when people are looking for change.
Yeah, Mike Rogers cannot run as an outsider. The guy's a former CIA agent and a member of Congress. He cannot run as an outsider.
I mean, is that a tough hand to play right now?
It's a very tough hand to play. He has to paint El Sayed as a kook.
Yeah, who has welded himself to Trump in a way that was not a true.
Wait, Ron, what's that stat again you were telling everybody?
Oh, yeah, no, look, I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, mean, that is the stat. You know, maybe this is different. Maybe the image of the Democratic Party is weaker than it was in 2018 and 2020 because people were disappointed in the outcomes of the Biden presidency. So maybe the old rules don't apply. But that was the pattern.
You've talked about often, sometimes Susan Collins has been able to go against the rule in the past.
But she's the one.
And so maybe Mike Rogers is able to do that.
And he would seem to be he seems to be positioned to do that.
Is there also a danger, Congresswoman, in alienating the Jewish vote and in alienating folks that are supportive of Israel, which obviously we know there are plenty of folks in Michigan who are not. It's clear that the AIPAC funding went both ways, and it certainly inspired some of El Sayed's supporters, but that folks that have voted Democrat for their entire life are saying, I cannot support that.
That is definitely a faction. It is there. I think it's a question of how big it is. Voter-wise, it's definitely a significant sort of noise factor and money factor. But I think we have to realize, like, there are a lot of younger Jewish people, progressive Jewish people, whose views about Israel, they might not be El Sayed's, but they're not Stevens's either. And so I think there is an opportunity here for, I think El Sayed's going to have to be more careful, more thoughtful, more disciplined if he wants to heal that up a little bit and be able to draw in those voters who really are core Democratic voters, but they're worried about where the Democratic Party is going on Israel. I think he has some work to do if he's going to pick those folks up.
I agree with you. Neither one of them are kind of overlapping where the center of gravity is in the Democratic Party. She did not move enough, clearly. I mean, she only the most perfunctory criticism of Netanyahu has a 5% favorability rating among Democrats. 80% of Democratic voters in Pew have an unfavorable view of the Israeli government, and she just would not acknowledge that, I think, or kind of, and I think that is a lesson for Democrats going forward. They're going to have to respond to that. You don't have to go as far as El Sayed, but to simply kind of stonewall and say nothing is going to change in our relationship, I think is not attainable. But I will say that what this means for the Democratic Party going forward, this is not the final inning. I mean, if he is the nominee and if Francesca Hong is the nominee, the socialist for governor in Wisconsin, two of the three states that are absolutely most important to Democrats getting back to the White House in 2028, the states that Trump's dislodged from the blue wall, whether they win in November, I think, is going to have a big impact on whether the left goes into 28 with a lot of momentum or is significantly deflated.
And because if he wins, then the thought is potentially Bernie couldn't get there, but maybe AOC can.
Totally.
Maybe we have taken over the party.
Ro Khanna or someone like that. Absolutely push the envelope because they will have some successes.
If he doesn't win in this year, I think the left candidate in 28, assuming he's the nominee, the left candidate in 28 is going to face a lot of skepticism among Democratic voters about whether you can really win back the White House.
It was Bernie didn't win, Elizabeth Warren didn't win. And here we go again. So, like, this movement has had legs. The left kind of more progressive.
And they were really close with a lot of people pushing against them. And if you've got a candidate from the left in 28 that is able to sort of clear the path, if that's AOC, probably Roe doesn't run against her, then they've got a lane all to themselves. And you've got Gavin and you've got Josh Shapiro and Pete Buttigieg and everybody else.
One consultant calls them the Steves. I mean, there's like a whole bunch of them.
It's like the equivalent of like Fox News Channel, right? You've got everybody on one side, and then everybody else has got to split up everything else.
Look at the primary. Look at the House races tonight. I mean, the story of the Democratic primaries this year: most systematic conflict between left and center, I think, in modern times, but no clear winner. No clear winner. The center has plenty of wins: Iowa, a Senate, California governor, a lot of the House race. Missouri won tonight. The left has plenty of wins. Michigan 7
At the end of the day, these are still. I think it all gets lost. These are still candidate races. We are electing people. We are not electing ideological
concepts.
You don't go to the ballot and vote progressive, liberal, moderate. You go to the ballot and you vote for a human being. And I think that's, at the end of the day, why we're seeing it go back and forth state to state.
And the answer is that either side can win in 28. That's what it tells you.
We're going to sneak in a quick break. Here's a tease. Congresswoman Katie Porter may be breaking out her whiteboard to do the math on what's happening when it comes to this race. Stay with us. More after this. We continue to get new information from Michigan. You look right now, the total 25,000 votes ahead for Abdul El-Sayed. We want to bring into the conversation right now some new voices for the first time. Joining us is Sarah Sadwani, who is a political science professor, joining us as well. And joining us as for the first time is Washington correspondent with Detroit News, Grant Schwab. Thank you both for being with us. Grant, as the gentleman in Detroit in this conversation, sort of what stands out to you so far in terms of what you're seeing?
So I just raced back to my hotel from the Abdul El-Sayed party. What stands out is maybe something you're seeing from afar, but I'll say maybe it bears out in person. The vibe at these parties was different. I was at the Abdul El-Sayed party. You're in this concert hall, sort of dark, dance floor, kind of stage up front. I looked at some of the coming acts. Rapper Vince Staples is going to be there in a few months. And then the Haley Stevens party across town. It's at a more sort of upscale hotel, sort of brighter lights, smaller crowd. And I think it speaks to sort of the vibes of the campaigns that you see from a lot of places. One is sort of more establishmentarian, if you will. And then the insurgent sort of progressive party had more of a, party feel to it. So I'd say that really stood out to me tonight, as the returns were coming in.
It's very close. There is still a path for Haley Stevens, but the more numbers that we get in, it looks more and more like it may be El-Sayed who wins this thing, Sarah, even though it's a lot closer than what the polls suggested. If he does, the fact that so much money was spent against him, the fact that almost everybody in the Democratic establishment was against him, and he's still able to win, what is the significance for that, not only in Michigan, but around the country?
Yeah, the Democratic Party has got to wake up to the fact that they keep putting money against candidates who are popular with the voters. I was listening to the conversation earlier with your panel, and there's this back and forth about whether or not this election shows that the Democratic Party is moving to the left, if it's moving to the center. And what we know is there's these candidates all over the country that are more left, more progressive, some are more centrist. And they're winning. And it has little to do with whether or not they're progressive or not. It has to do with their authenticity. This establishment piece is the part that voters are voting against. And so the Democratic Party definitely needs to wake up to that fact. I was in New Jersey recently. Their governor, Mikey Sherrill, has nothing in common with Zohran Mamdani just up the road in New York City, but they both won, not because of a common ideology, but because of their running as authentic candidates, not because of who consultants told them to be. And I think that's a real takeaway from this election if El-Sayed is able to pull this off.
And Grant, if it is El-Sayed, how do you sort of handicap or see this race against Mike Rogers? And speaking to voters on the ground, how willing do you think the Haley Stevens voters are to support Abdul El-Sayed?
Well, in handicapping, some of the polls I've seen say that Abdul El-Sayed trails Mike Rogers, but by a significant margin heading in. But I want to see them duke it out for a few weeks, for a few months before I make any sort of assessment on who is a favorite in this race, because I think a lot of people who are tuned out of primaries, all of a sudden you get closer to the general. That's when people start to learn these people's names. So, in handicapping, I would say, toss up. Let's let them both try to get to voters head to head, assuming Abdul El-Sayed wins. And as for the Stevens voters going over to Abdul, there was a note from Abdul's speech tonight where he talked about coming together, mending fences. He told his supporters not to go out and gloat, to say, I told you so. So he really wants to try to build a campaign where they reach more people and they can have a bigger tent. But I asked him about this in person a couple days ago, and he said, I'll have anyone who supports money out of politics, Medicare for all, and money out of politics, money in your pocket, Medicare for all is his slogan. So he wants to bring in those people and I think it'll take a lot of effort for him to do so.
And Sarah, in terms of the Democratic establishment, we all can recite his slogan because he says it so much, and we know what he wants to do, even if it is almost impossible to get there with the actual votes that are in the Senate right now. But is there a messaging policy problem for establishment Democrats in terms of having a clear message of what they're actually going to deliver for Democratic voters?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, voters have been in this sort of situationship with the Democratic Party for quite some time now, where there's a lot of promises, but when the time comes, there's no delivery. And I think with these newer candidates who, yes, maybe are promising the world, at least they're speaking straight to the points that voters care the most about. Things are expensive in America today, whether you're in Michigan or Los Angeles. The cost of living is extraordinarily high, and for whatever reason, these typical candidates aren't necessarily speaking to the real challenges that people face. And they also don't have a track record to run on. They haven't been able to bring down costs. Donald Trump linked the rising costs to Democrats. Whether or not that's true, that message is out there and people are believing it. And so there's this real moment. This is a change election. And so people are looking for those kinds of changes.
Sarah Sidwani, Grant Schwab, thanks so much for staying up late with us. We appreciate it, and thanks for sharing your perspective. We've got more coverage of election night in America. New numbers are coming in, plus Katie Porter's whiteboard. Stay with us. We just got another update from Michigan during that commercial break. Numbers breaking for Haley Stevens. She is now trailing by just under 25,000 votes, 48.9% for Abdul El-Sayed, 47.1% for Haley Stevens. When I think of election nights, to me, the king of election nights was my hero, Tim Russert, who was on, especially in year 2000, was the king of the whiteboard because it got late at night and he needed to draw out what was happening. Tonight, we have perhaps the queen of the whiteboard from Congress on our set. And so we thought if only there was somebody who knows how to operate a whiteboard. Congresswoman Katie Porter here with her whiteboard, our whiteboard, which isn't quite as nice as her whiteboard, but we found something. It's late, okay? We weren't expecting this. You've got the math.
All right, so what I want to show people is that what's been happening since 11 o'clock, which is this late counted vote. And this late counted vote, we've counted about
11 o'clock Pacific, just to be clear.
Pacific time.
Okay.
We've counted about 30,676 votes. Of those, Stevens won the majority. She is winning more than El-Sayed. When you do this math out, Stevens is winning 55% of the vote, and El-Sayed is winning 45%. Here's the problem. Right now, we've got about 1.37 million votes that have already been counted in Michigan. 91% of the vote, estimated vote, is in. That means how many ballots are there out there to be counted? Only about 125,000. To close that gap right now that we just showed voters, that 24,964 votes, Stevens has got to do better than 55%. She would need to be winning 60%. And so she's just not quite getting there.
55 the rest of the way means he wins by about 12,000 votes, though. I mean, just think about how evenly divided the party is.
But not close enough for a recount.
But it is possible if some of those outstanding votes are in Wayne County, which we know has been doing well for her, that maybe she gets to 60.
60 is not crazy, but
it's not like 80.
Not getting there.
It's better than she's performed all
night. By the way, one other point we've kind of lost sight of, how many more people voted in the Democratic primary than in the Republican primary today? Republicans had a contested primary for governor, but as we are seeing in other states, I mean, Democrats are more energized. Like there were 1.1 million votes, I believe, in the 2018 governor primary between Gretchen Whitmer and El-Sayed. This is going to be 1.5 million. I mean, that is a lot of people to come out. And again, that's why all the questions about whether El Sayed can be competitive, that is an underlying reality. Democrats are very energized. They view what Trump is doing as an existential threat to everything they value about the country, and you're seeing it again tonight.
By the way, Matt, when you see that whiteboard, aren't you glad you're not a corporate CEO?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
He's a good sport about it, and I appreciate it.
That's right.
Flashbacks
Coach, my clients are going to say, what was it like?
Yeah.
To have it come out. So if that math stays, sort of what's the big takeaway then from this race, and why were the polls so off?
Yeah, I mean, look, there are many reasons why polling is off. I'm sure the private polling that each candidate had was spot on.
I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, typically they're more accurate than public polls. But I mean, again, polls are, I'm always reminded by my pollsters, they're a snapshot in time, and it depends upon who they talk to. So in this case, I think that you saw Haley Stevens come out pretty, I think that she lost a little steam, and it seems like she picked it up at the end. If she had continued, when those results came out that showed her down by double digits, I'm sure it was a collective, oh man.
Yeah.
And if she had just kept going and powered through, maybe she doesn't have to make up 13,000 votes at the end.
It's a perfect metaphor for this, like I said, for this primary season. I think we're seeing the most systemic conflict between left and center. And there is no clear winner. I mean, there just is not a clear winner. Each side has not. Graham Plattner blew out Janet Mills, and Josh Turek won in Iowa. And if you look at the House races tonight, Wesley Bell crushed Cori Bush, and Elaine Luria won, and then the progressive won in Michigan 7 because the two centrists split the vote. You have a Democratic Party that has really divergent visions of how to move forward. But I think fundamentally, the rank and file of the party is still, even as they're being pulled in these different directions, energized by the thought of trying to put some
strength on Trump. And it's interesting also, just on the polling point, Congresswoman, that we have seen sort of the rise of some of that partisan private polling as some, sort of nonpartisan polling has gone down. And just like the internet, people end up getting the numbers that they want. So they're living in an echo chamber,
Worse than that, what we have seen is people saying, let me look at the betting markets, for example.
Oh, terrible.
Let me see who's going to win, and then I will use that information to decide who I'm going to vote for.
And we saw some of that in your race for California governor.
Opposite.
Exactly.
The betting markets are supposed to reflect the electorate. So I do think, to the extent that people are going on the internet, for example, or they're going on social media, they're looking at Kalshi or one of these betting markets, and they're saying, oh, lots of followers for this person. They are then saying, oh, that person's going to win. I want to vote for the winner. I think one of the most heartening things about this Michigan race, about tonight, is the people of Michigan did some real work of democracy here. They went out, they heard these candidates, they thought about it. It was hard fought. There was a lot of money spent. And
the proof's in the pudding.
Yeah, a lot of people vote. Right. A lot of people voted.
1.3 million people.
1.37 million
heading
votes
toward
in a
1.5.
Democratic primary, heading for 1.5 million.
400,000 more than 2018. I mean, that's a lot of people.
That shows enthusiasm, that there was a real choice. I mean, the sad part is that for Congresswoman Stevens, is that if the third candidate, McMorrow, hadn't run, she probably picks up a big chunk of those
we don't agree on
votes.
this. I don't think it's clear where McMorrow's voters would have gone.
And
I can make an argument that McMorrow voters would have gone to Stevens. I can make an argument that McMorrow voters would have gone to El Sayed. And listen, I heard this about
so
myself.
Much more
if Katie Porter had dropped out,
it's so much more
those
interesting
voters
to
would have
say
gone
that.
to Steyer, Becerra. I actually think they would have split 50-50.
Well, and that was the problem for McMorrow, that she didn't have a clear path. Because her people did split 50-50, and she didn't have a lane to herself. McMorrow, by the way, who is polling right now about 4% of this, has said that she will endorse automatically the winner, that she was planning to go to the winner's party tonight if there was a winner, and that she was going to do everything possible to try to bring the party together. We're going to sneak in a quick break. We do expect more numbers, though, so stay with us as we continue to follow these results in Michigan. We We are back with more numbers from Michigan. Let's put those up on the screen right now. We just got a few new votes trickling in. Right now, Abdul El-Sayed ahead by 24,922 votes, 48.9, 47.1. It appears the most likely outcome, if you had to bet right now, is Abdul El-Sayed would win, but don't bet all your money because Haley Stevens still has a chance. Not that we're encouraging any betting. I actually think betting on politics is horrible and should be outlawed on Kalshi and all that, but that's my own take. Congresswoman, this is a change election. Is that challenging for Haley Stevens?
Well, I mean, if you take where El-Sayed's strength was, where he's coming from, and you say Michigan voters want problems in their lives solved, and they want things fixed, they want something different, then I couldn't tell you what Haley offers to do different. And I have a lot of respect for Haley Stevens. She's a hard worker, she's smart, I served with her. But what she seems to be saying is, I'm not going to be Trump.
Right.
Right? And I'll fight for Michigan, and I'm not going to be Trump. And the question for
and I'm a workhorse, not a show horse. And he likes doing podcasts.
I'm electable, and I'm not Trump. Okay. I think the question is, for kids like mine, teenagers like mine, they're saying, well, does that help me afford a house? Does that help me retire? Does that do anything about AI taking my jobs? Does that do anything about the corruption that we have seen the last 10 or 20 years in politics? And I think the answer probably is no. And so I think that's why you see younger people, people who are not always voters, infrequent voters, coming out for El-Sayed is because they're like, he will actually change things and people want change. Now, we haven't seen people wanting change in every election. But I think tonight in Michigan, we did.
Yeah. I was struck throughout this race that unlike Biden and Buttigieg in 2020, who challenged the ideas of kind of the ascendant left, who raised questions, forced Bernie and Elizabeth Warren to defend single payer, she didn't really engage him that hard on any of the big issues. As we talked about before, she didn't really offer an alternative vision on Israel. She didn't really explain why she did not think giving the federal government control over the healthcare system at a time when RFK Jr. is the Health and Human Services Secretary might not be a great idea for Democrats. And that, I think, is a real lesson for the center of the party. They ultimately have to have the confidence of their convictions and believe that they can win some of these arguments, because that is one thing she just didn't do. She just she tried to basically say, I'm electable, I'm a workhorse. She didn't really engage on the issue.
Or maybe thinks
to what end?
To what end? And maybe the party itself has changed on those issues. Wrap around sort of final thought from each of you.
Yeah, I mean, look, you saw the divide that exists in the Democratic Party that works in individual congressional races with smaller, more compact electorates. I think that, you know, with the tens of millions of dollars spent tonight, I think that there is going to be a rift that they say they're going to heal. Mike Rogers, the race is still going to be a toss-up, but Mike Rogers got the candidate he wants to run
Final
against.
sentence from each of you.
I think this is a good night for Democrats. I think to have two talented, strong, young candidates and to have the turnout that we saw in this primary is very, very good news for Democrats. And I think Democrats are going to prevail. Either of them, either of these Democrats.
That
will
was a
beat
sentence
Mike
with lots of semicolons. Last sentence, Ron.
Assuming El-Sayed is the nominee, Democratic voters have set up a real-world test of how to win back purple states. Jocelyn Benson, the governor candidate, is a lot more centrist, and we will see which one of them performs better in November.
This has been such a joy to hang out with all three of you for the last 3 hours. It's been fun to witness history together.
And the history of the return of the whiteboard, too.
A moment that we all experienced together. We'll be back with the stories to watch in the hours ahead. Stay with us. You're watching This Story Is. We continue to follow the numbers in Michigan. 90% of the votes have been counted. Progressive candidate Abdul El-Sayed is maintaining his narrow lead over Congresswoman Haley Stevens. That number of estimated votes just went down to 90%, which means that they've found some more votes to count. So We'll continue to follow that. Let's take a look at other stories we're following in the day ahead. President Trump set to deliver a speech in Las Vegas on Wednesday. He arrived a little bit earlier. A White House official says the president is expected to focus on the economy and highlight tax cuts. When he spoke there in April, Mr. Trump called Las Vegas the birthplace of his policy, no tax on tips. That's President Trump late tonight in Las Vegas. Vice President J.D. Vance will host a White House roundtable on combating fraud Wednesday. As head of the White House task force to eliminate fraud, Vance will meet with members of Congress to discuss potential anti-fraud legislation. Official telling CNN Congress has an important role to play in cracking down on fraudsters and protecting federal programs from abuse. President Trump's pick for Attorney General has cleared the Senate Judiciary Committee. Todd Blanche now needs a majority vote in the full Senate, where his confirmation could be decided by a razor-thin margin. Maine Senator Susan Collins says she opposes Blanche's nomination, meaning he can afford to lose only one more Republican vote. Final vote expected later this week. Thanks for being with us as we've watched history together in Michigan. I'm Alex Michelson. Our special coverage of election night in America continues next with my colleague Polo Sandoval, and maybe the race will be called in his hours. Thanks for being with us.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to CNN's special election coverage. I'm Polo Sandoval, live in New York, where it is 3 a.m., and it is the morning after election night in America. And some candidates still haven't been able to go to sleep as votes do continue coming in. Primaries across 5 states will eventually determine who will face off in the November midterm elections. Chance to possibly flip control of the Congress. You see where the stakes are high. Voters went to the polls in Missouri, Kansas, Virginia, and Washington State. But right now, much of the focus is on the battleground state of Michigan in Detroit, currently 3 a.m. And about 90% of the votes are in for the state's Democratic Senate primary. It is a close race between progressive Abdul El-Sayed and House Democrat Haley Stevens, who have both touted a new path forward for Democrats in their state. Both candidates spoke to their supporters earlier as votes continue to trickle in. Here's what they each said about their hope for the road ahead for Democrats in Michigan.
We've had a long, hard-fought primary, and we'll know soon who our nominee is going to be. And whoever wins is going to go and take on Mike Rogers. Republicans are going to do everything they can to throw all the dirt, all the mud, the kitchen sink at us, because they want to keep the U.S. Senate red. So Mike Rogers can keep rubber stamping Donald Trump's ridiculous agenda.
Let's come together to build a movement that's even bigger, that's even stronger, that's even more powerful, that reaches into the very depths of this state, that reminds us the best of who we are and who we can be. That is the commitment I want all of us to be making as we leave here tonight.
All right, let's begin our coverage now and head over live to Lily Guindy, a staff reporter with the Gongwer News Service in Lansing, Michigan. It is wonderful to see you. Thank you so much for staying up late for us.
Oh, thanks for having me, Polo.
Of course. Let's get started with what you can tell us about the votes that are left to count right now and what both campaigns are looking at in terms of where those outstanding votes are actually coming from.
Yeah, so we're looking at less than 100,000 votes left out of Detroit, and we've been at that number for a little while now. Wayne County is historically a tough call to make earlier in the night. We've waited till 4 or 5 a.m. in the past for votes from there. And those last Detroit area votes, as well as some of our college towns, we were waiting on some Ingham County numbers that had just now come in. We saw Ingham County Clerk Barb Byram just a few moments ago tweet that her county was accounted for. So we're kind of seeing the last trickles from around the state. And these are all areas where, you know, Abdul El-Sayed could pick up a few votes. Haley Stevens could pick up a few votes. This isn't technically over, but we are really reaching that finish line.
And Lily, as you know, polls were showing what appeared to some polls were showing a nearly double-digit victory for El-Sayed. But as you just mentioned right now, and as we just showed viewers in some of the latest returns right now, those margins are much narrower than expected. I'm curious, just based on your reporting, what does that tell us about the progressive movement in the crucial state of Michigan?
Well, I think what it tells anyone who's been really watching this race from inside the state the last few months is, you know, this is what we expected. We expected a close race. We expected that. I think there was, after the last few months, we expected to see El-Sayed pull off a victory tonight. But what we're seeing is a victory for El-Sayed and for progressives that looks a lot more like the Michigan electorate. You know, it's complicated. It's not as maybe cut and dry as it is in other parts of the country. We saw him do very well in the Upper Peninsula, which that's historically not a place that you would expect a progressive to perform. And then we saw, you know, lower turnout in the southern border states or border counties. And that's, you know, kind of an interesting shakeup on the map county-wise, but it doesn't necessarily bode terribly for progressives come general election time.
Lily, let's expand on the complicated nature of just what was heavy on the minds of voters. You, without a doubt, were speaking to some of those voters. So just give our viewers around the world a sense of what the average Democratic voter in Michigan was looking for in their candidate. I mean, what was the driving issue for so many of them this year?
Yeah. I mean, I'll say, I won't say there was a driving issue, but there was a driving message, I think. And maybe that message, more so than it has been in the past, is the person on the ballot, is the person who I send to the general election going to be someone who reflects how just angry most Democrats in our state are right now? We saw people who, you know, traditionally you would fit them into, sort of slot them into the demographics that might have gone for Haley Stevens in prior elections, come out and say, I'm all in for Abdul El-Sayed because he feels like a change agent. He feels like someone who is not the status quo. People are frankly just ticked off. And I think we're seeing those results come out, you know, maybe not to the degree some people expected, but there were a lot of people who maybe were voting more on vibes or feelings than they were on policy, especially in this primary, because they're just at the end of their rope.
Yeah, no, and those vibes are dramatically different. Just help us also preview what would be a possible face-off come November, regardless of what a candidate goes on to those primary elections. I mean, what is Mike Rogers, the Republican who would face off with the Democrat that moves forward? How are they strategizing? I mean, what's their campaign saying?
Yeah, I mean, if you're Mike Rogers, you're going to be putting out a statement tonight, and if the Democratic nominee is Abdul El-Sayed, crowing about how this was the candidate you wanted to run against, right? We've seen Republicans sort of propping up these progressive candidates as the easier option to run against. But I think beneath that, there is an acknowledgement from a lot of folks, at least in the Michigan Republican Party, that they are going to be facing down, you know, the quote unquote blue wave that comes with a midterm in the second Trump presidency. And I think there is an acknowledgement from within the party here that there's going to be an uphill climb. It's not automatic for anyone. It's going to be maybe as close a general election as it is a primary election right now. And Mike Rogers has certainly changed in the past couple of years. He's changed since he was in Congress. He used to sort of be this more moderate voice that differentiated himself from President Trump, and that was what he hung his hat on. And now we see him, you know, on the quote unquote Trump train, because that was what he needed to get through a couple primaries in the past few years. And I'm not sure that he'll be able to, you know, wield that same sort of independent thematic influence over the general election that maybe he has in the past. And that could be very interesting against a candidate like Abdul El-Sayed, who is kind of trying to paint himself as, you know, not just the DSA progressive, but the independent progressive.
Right. I thought one of the other elements that makes this race, especially this election, so fascinating were just the voter turnout. I mean, it was nothing short of impressive. Once all the results are in, those numbers could potentially surpass those records that were set during the election in 2020, 1.5 million votes. Obviously, may not necessarily, to your earlier point, doesn't really speak a whole lot in terms of how Democrats will perform in a few months. But what do you think is the main takeaway from that, Lily? I mean, does it really speak to the re-energized base for some Democrats in that state?
You know what? I actually will say it does, because we can look at the gubernatorial primary turnout we saw for Jocelyn Benson, who was virtually unopposed. Chris Swanson was polling, I think, near 6% to her 80-something% a couple weeks ago. Like, this was really, truly not a race where maybe you would think that Democrats would have turned out in the way they did, but they had almost 500,000 more people go to vote in that Democratic gubernatorial primary than Republicans did in their primary, which was technically the more competitive primary. And I think we can take that, and say maybe that people were energized to go fill out the whole ballot because they were going out to vote in the U.S. Senate race, because that certainly was a driving factor for a lot of Michiganders. But I also think that, is a good sign for Democrats going into this general election to say, look, we had 500,000 more people come out to vote in what was basically an uncontested gubernatorial primary. That has to mean that people are, they're motivated, they're feeling, again, a lot of feelings, and, if they can carry that momentum through the next few months into November, I think it could be very interesting to see what we end up with come general election day.
Without a doubt. It is also a very long day and a busy one, Lily Guiney, so we are tremendously grateful that you could set aside some time to bring us up to speed on those numbers that continue to come in. Do come back anytime as we continue to monitor those returns out of the great state of Michigan. Thank you. And we will certainly keep you up to speed, again, for all of our viewers on those numbers as they continue to come in. Meanwhile, let's get you up to speed on some of our other headlines. President Trump claiming that the Strait of Hormuz will be reopened soon, or that he could potentially, that he would launch new strikes on Iran. And this comes as Qatar says that efforts to end the conflict between the U.S. and Iran are in very progressive stages, he said. Mediators are currently focused on finding a short-term resolution that would bring Washington and Tehran back to the negotiating table. In the meantime, sources are telling us that the U.S. military has used up nearly 80% of its interceptors for a key missile defense system. And all of this as senior military commanders are warning of a dangerously low munition stockpile. Gulf allies are also sounding the alarm about how a shortage of air defense systems could possibly impact their ability to intercept potential Iranian strikes if President Trump decides to escalate the war. CNN's Kevin Liptak is in Las Vegas with more on President Trump's remarks about Iran.
President Trump is voicing confidence that a deal with Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz could happen in the next 48 hours or so. That's what he told reporters as he was heading here to Las Vegas, where he has an event on Wednesday. The president saying that the discussions that are underway with Iran now are going well, but also warning in a Fox News interview that he taped earlier in the day that if Iran does not agree to this deal, and if they walk away from the talks again, that a major escalation is still possible. Now, there's still a degree of discrepancy between what Iran says is happening and what President Trump says is underway. Iran says that it is not discussing anything directly with the United States at the moment. What they do say they're doing is holding conversations with Oman, which is on the other coast of the Strait of Hormuz, about reopening that waterway. And what we have understood from our sources is that those discussions are progressing and that they could have a deal sometime this week, potentially in the next day or so. And that's exactly the time frame that President Trump was laying out on Tuesday evening as well. Now, in terms of what he said about if that does not come to pass, he suggested that he would hit Iran even harder than he had previously, saying that this escalation in the conflict that he had been threatening last week but held off on was still a possibility if this diplomatic route didn't end up panning out. And now what the president is describing here is essentially two phases. One, reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Now, what that exactly that looks like at this point, we don't know. For example, would Iran be able to charge fees on vessels passing through the strait? The president has said that that would be a non-starter, but it's something that is still under discussion. Another question is whether Iran would agree to hold off on closing the strait in the future, essentially giving up its control over this channel through which so much of the world's oil supply flows. So the president saying that that will be the first phase of this discussion. The second phase will be talking about Iran's nuclear program. Now, if that sounds familiar, it's because it's exactly what was prescribed in the Memorandum of Understanding that the president signed in June, and then he said was dead 2 weeks later because he claimed that the Iranians were negotiating in bad faith. Now, the president doesn't sound any more faithful in the Iranians now. He keeps saying that they are being duplicitous, saying things like that there are no talks when in fact there are talks, but still the president seems intent on trying to find a diplomatic solution to this months-long conflict. Kevin Liptak, CNN, Las Vegas.
Russian forces are targeting Kyiv with waves of ballistic missiles. Ukraine's president says that 17 people were killed early Wednesday and more than 50 others wounded. Fires broke out across the Ukrainian capital, with missiles destroying buildings as people slept inside. Ukrainian officials warning that the threat of more strikes remains. Right now, search and rescue teams are looking for anyone who may be trapped beneath the rubble. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is speaking out for the first time since the U.S. said that it reached a disarmament agreement with Hamas.
President Trump and his team believe they can bring about Hamas's disarmament and the demilitarization of Gaza. We are examining that. They have sent us a draft. We did not agree to it. It is not our draft. We sent them our comments. In fact, we sent our comments before the media campaign on this issue began.
That video from the Prime Minister's official social media accounts. Prime Minister Netanyahu is seeking to reassure Israeli voters that President Trump's latest push in Gaza is far from final. However, Netanyahu is facing mounting pressure from the White House to fully end the fighting in Gaza and support Hamas's commitment to disarmament. Nearly 3 years after an Israeli attack on a residential block in Gaza City, more than 100 Palestinians killed in that strike were laid to rest in a mass funeral. Gaza's civil defense began shifting through the rubble last month to recover their remains, but dozens of victims still have not been found. CNN's Jeremy Diamond with this report.
Draped in Palestinian flags, the remains of 112 people are carried through the war-torn streets of Gaza City. This funeral procession is nearly 3 years overdue. The 112 men, women, and children being buried today were killed in November 2023, when Israeli bombs struck a residential block in this same city. Search and rescue teams were only able to begin recovering bodies from the rubble last month. Nearly 3 weeks later, Gaza's civil defense spokesman says they recovered the remains of 112 people. Dozens more could not be found. Praying over his cousin's bodies, Issam Abu Sharia has a different question. Who will he play with?
كنا نلعب شريدة وكل شيء. أنا زعلان عشان فيش حد ألعب معاه.
Hundreds have come to bid farewell. Nearly every person killed in that November 2023 attack hailed from 2 large Palestinian families, one of which is tied to the Mujahideen Brigades, a Palestinian militant group. The Israeli military has not publicly identified any militants killed in that strike. Many more bodies are still trapped beneath the rubble. Some 8,000, according to Gaza's civil defense.
Jeremy Diamond reporting there. And on the way here on CNN Newsroom, charges have now been filed for the man accused of one of the 3 devastating wildfires that continues burning in Spokane, Washington. We'll have that latest on the investigation and also the damage done so far. And welcome back to CNN Newsroom, where we continue to monitor the election results coming out of that crucial state of Michigan as we wait to learn what Democratic candidate will move on to face as Republican opponent or their Republican opponent come November. Where you see there with now 91% of the vote counted. You see El Sayed there with 48.8% of the vote, holding on to a comfortable lead there. Abdul El Sayed ahead of Haley Stevens with 47.2%. Again, that's with 91% of the vote counted so far. We'll check back on that count. Meanwhile, embattled Republican Congressman Max Miller speaking out in an interview with CNN, refusing to drop his re-election bid as he faces abuse allegations from his ex-wife, Emily Marino. Allegations that he denies. Marino has accused Miller of multiple instances of domestic abuse, including an incident in which she says that he held a gun to her. Those allegations were revealed during police interviews as detectives looked into how the couple's young daughter broke her collarbone. No charges were filed in connection to their daughter's injuries. Separately, Miller's attorney is now apologizing for releasing a sensitive image of the congressman's little girl in documents shared online. Now, all of this is happening as he faces re-election in Ohio's 7th Congressional District, GOP stronghold. Meanwhile, his ex-father-in-law, Republican Senator Bernie Moreno, is calling on Miller to not just pull back from the race, but to leave Congress. Miller has also denied allegations that he abused his ex-girlfriend, Stephanie Grisham, a former White House communications director. Earlier, CNN's Jake Tapper asked Miller about these allegations. Here's his answer.
There are now three women who have accused you of violent behavior. Politico published a report in 2021 that says when you were in high school, you, quote, pushed a girl out of the dorm of his room and she fell down some stairs after he became enraged when she resisted his attempts to touch her, according to three people who were there and many more who heard about the incident in the aftermath. Now, you deny that, but the woman in question told Mother Jones reporter Abby Vasulis just days ago that it happened and was, quote, one of the more traumatic nights of her life.
Well,
now,
I would love for that individual to go on the record because that.
Okay.
Jake, I was
hold on, because I'm not done with the list of women
that
have accused you of violence. Then there is former White House press secretary. Okay, you were young. Then there's a former White House press secretary, Stephanie Grisham, who was your ex-girlfriend. She accused you of being abusive and having a violent streak. She wrote in her book, quote, I could do nothing right by him. I would wake up every morning shaking with anxiety about his mood that day. I had seen his temper before and it had scared me, unquote. She has recently filed a temporary restraining order against you in a defamation case. And now there are these claims from your ex-wife, Emily Marino. And I guess the question is, are all three of these women who don't know each other, are all three of them lying?
Yes, it's very easy, and I can tell you why. Every single time, and people have asked me, you know, what are you going to do? Are you going to drop out of this race? Are you going to resign? You know, are you going to get out before the deadline? And my answer to you, Jake, is no. And I can tell you why. In 2016, when President Donald J. Trump faced the most extreme allegations in the world that hit him day after day after day, and people in the media, very much like yourself and others, said that he would have no shot at winning, that he should not be the President of the United States. But guess what? He stayed in and he was resilient. And what the American people can see is that they can see that somebody is fighting who is resilient, and that is a quality that the American people cherish.
NASA has been watching closely for the impact of part of a SpaceX rocket crashing into the moon. It was projected to collide with the lunar surface last hour. The Falcon 9 rocket carried 2 robotic commercial lunar landers into space. Its first stage returned safely to Earth, but instead of burning up in Earth's atmosphere, the upper stage was pulled onto the collision course with the moon, and that was due in part to solar activity and gravitational forces. Well, scientists are hoping to study the incident to learn a little bit more about the moon and also how to better shield their astronauts for future NASA missions to the lunar surface. And we're also following the latest developments on the Washington state wildfires. 37-year-old Aaron Farinacci, a convicted felon, now charged with first-degree arson in connection with one of those 3 major wildfires that are burning in Spokane County. His arraignment set for Thursday. He was arrested on Monday after investigators said that he was spotted kneeling in the grass where the fire started over the weekend. Well, they say that he had waterproof matches and a lighter on him. The Spokane fires have now burned more than 10,000 acres since they broke out on Saturday. Some say the scene looks pretty much like a war zone. And hundreds of homes and other structures have been destroyed so far, and authorities say that thousands more are still at risk days later. About 65,000 residents were evacuated, and officials say that 14 people who initially couldn't be reached have now been contacted. Unfortunately, no injuries or deaths have been reported here. Let's take you to Greece now, where firefighters are racing to strengthen containment lines just west of Athens as more heat and high winds are expected in the coming days. Officials there say that several fires were brought under control in mountain and coastal areas just outside of the Greek capital, where the winds did stay relatively calm. Let's go now to journalist Elinda Lavropoulou, who joins me live from Parga, Greece. So what is the latest?
Well, there's a better picture today, certainly, in terms of the fire fronts. There are no live fronts at the moment. There have been flare-ups throughout the night, so firefighters have been working tirelessly on the ground after it took them 5 days to contain this mega fire burning close to the Greek capital, Athens, just 40 miles out of Athens. But of course, this means that now residents are returning, assessments are beginning, and the image that we see as the smoke lifts is absolutely grim. We have some first figures from the observatory in Athens, according to which over 42% of forested areas around the Greek capital have burned in the last 9 years. You can understand the scale of destruction in that. There have been 15 big fires in Athens in the last 10 years, Greater Athens in the last 10 years, and this has been the cost. And of course, in just this last fire alone, we've had the cost of 2 human lives. Let's not forget 2 firefighters that died when 2 firefighting helicopters collided. So now the time comes for the assessment, as there is a race against time, because the country remains on red alert today, as we expect more coming our way, Polo.
Yeah, just seeing some of those aerial images, they're absolutely heartbreaking. And what is usually, it looks like winter in what is usually a lush landscape with all those leaves gone. Elinda Lavropoulou, thank you so much for the update. And up next, an update on our top story, the vote counts in Michigan's hotly contested Democratic Senate primary. Stay with us. You're watching CNN Newsroom and our election coverage. And welcome back. I'm Polo Sandoval in New York, and these are today's top stories. Qatar says that efforts to end the conflict between the U.S. and Iran are in very progressive stages. The top Qatari official also revealed that drafts of a potential agreement are being circulated, but that there are no direct talks between the two sides. Mediators are currently focused on finding a short-term resolution, they said, that would bring Washington and Tehran back to the negotiating table. President Trump's pick for Attorney General has cleared a Senate Judiciary Committee. Todd Blanche now needs a majority vote in the full Senate, where his confirmation could be decided by a razor-thin margin. Maine Senator Susan Collins says that she opposes Blanche's nomination, meaning that he can afford to lose only one more Republican vote. That final vote, by the way, is expected later this week. And it's still too early to call the winner of Michigan's Democratic Senate primary. With just over 90% of the votes counted, progressive candidate Abdul El-Sayed holding onto his narrow lead over House Democrat Haley Stevens. The winner expected to face former House Republican Mike Rogers in the November midterm. Earlier, we heard from both candidates as they highlighted what's at stake in the midterm elections. This is what they each told their supporters a few hours ago.
They want to tell us that here in Michigan, we're a purple state. That somehow everybody walks around wondering, I wonder where I stand on a left-right spectrum. When really, up and down the state, what you hear is, I wonder how I can afford my rent. I wonder how I can afford my groceries. I don't know what will happen if I get sick because I can't afford my deductible. We are not a purple state. We are a state in need of a movement.
They want to keep the Senate red so Mike Rogers can go to Washington again and sell us out to the highest bidder and make himself even wealthier. They want to keep the Senate red so Mike Rogers can ban abortion, gut health care, and roll back workers' rights and voting rights. Friends, we are not going to let that happen.
All right, joining me live from Oxford, England, is Richard Johnson, Senior Lecturer in U.S. Politics at Queen Mary University in London. It's always great to see you, Richard. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you.
I'm wondering if I could get your initial take as you watch it from England, just the crucial nature of this midterm election, and then also what candidate do you think that Republican Mike Rogers prefer to face off with come the general election?
Well, you know, the Michigan Senate race in many ways is a microcosm of a battle which has been ongoing in the Democratic Party, I would say, since 2016, when Bernie Sanders faced off against Hillary Clinton, and really has been unresolved ever since, and I think is also a bit of a preview for what we can expect in the presidential primaries for 2028. And that's the conflict between what we might kind of call left-wing ideological consistency or having an uncompromising left-wing agenda versus electability. And that's really what these two candidates put forward between the election. Abdul al-Sayed was saying that he was someone who wouldn't compromise on his beliefs, that he had this set of views. He didn't call himself a socialist, but he was certainly seen as on the left of the party. And Haley Stevens said, look, what we need to focus on is winning in a purple state. It's interesting, al-Sayed rejected that characterization of Michigan, but it is a purple state. And she said, look, we need to win back the Senate. And it's going to be a steep climb for the Democrats to win back the Senate. They need to hold all of their currently held seats, and Michigan is one of the ones they have to hold. This is an open seat for a retiring Democrat. And then they have to gain 4 more seats, at least 3 of which will have to be in red states that went for Trump pretty handsomely at the last election. So that's the dilemma, that's the conflict going on in the Democratic Party at the moment. And it's going to be unresolved with this Senate race, which is itself on a knife edge at the moment.
Richard, what's your assessment also of the ability for Michigan Democrats, after we find out who's moving ahead, to coalesce and to bring that party together? And is there perhaps one candidate that could make that a little easier than the other?
Well, you know, I thought it was really interesting listening to Abdul al-Sayed's remarks, I guess earlier tonight, when he came out and said that the result has not been decided, but he says whatever the result may be, we need to come together, that what unites us as Democrats is more important than what divides us. And you might listen to that and think, wow, that's a very gracious set of comments that he's making. In one sense, it is. But also, I think al-Sayed was saying it because I think he expects to win. And I think it'll be very close, but he is ahead. And now we're getting to more than 90% of precincts reporting, and he's still got a nearly 2 percentage point lead. So I think he may win this, but we can't call it at this stage for sure. And there's still a chance he might not. But I think he was saying that because he wants to sound the bigger person, so that if he does win, then he can say to Haley Stevens, look, I called for unity regardless of who wins, and I want to have your strong backing. And to be honest, I think Haley Stevens, given what she's been saying about the importance of winning back the Senate, should feel equally strongly about getting behind the Democratic nominee. I do think it's all hands on deck here. And I think in a way it sort of undercuts the electability argument, because if partisanship is so strong in America now, that basically whoever the parties nominate, all of the party identifiers will roll in behind them, then, does it really matter if you choose a more moderate candidate or not? I mean, I think at this stage now, partisanship is so strong that the idea that some moderate Democrats might vote Republican seems really quite unlikely in this day and age.
And just as you were speaking, we actually saw that number go up to 93% now. And just to show our viewers, we can bring those numbers back up again, of just how narrow a margin, with Abdul al-Sayed now only about 20,600 votes. So certainly the numbers that we initially had expected, as you know, Richard, was for al-Sayed to lead potentially by double digits. So perhaps close with the message for Democrats at this point, but certainly with a reminder of what you just said, that anything could potentially happen.
Yeah, and you know, the big question mark for me in this race was what's going to happen in Detroit. And from what I've seen, it looks like Katie Stevens is winning Detroit. She's slightly overperforming, I think, where we expected to, with where her numbers might have been in Detroit. The late votes that are being counted are expected to tilt a bit more in her way because these are mail-in ballots where she had been leading in mail-in ballots that had already been counted. So, you know, the race could continue to tighten. I don't want to deny that at all. And really, Detroit, of course, Detroit's a very diverse place. There are parts of Detroit where El Sayed did very, very well. But the African-American community was the big question mark in this campaign. And I think Haley Stevens, she hugged very close to her past association with the Obama administration. She was part of the task force that the president put together, former President Obama put together on the auto industry back during the Great Recession. And she ran ads with comments that Obama had said that were very favorable about her and her role with her. And I think, you know, that association with Obama still is very important in some segments of the Democratic Party more generally, but especially in the African-American electorate. And I think that that's been helpful for her in this race.
It certainly was, especially after being endorsed by much of the established Democrats, including the governor of the state of Michigan. Richard Johnson, we are so glad that you could join us to help us cover this well into the night. Again, that number still going up, the number of returns, a reminder that the counting continues in the crucial state of Michigan in this contest. Thank you so much, Richard. You have a good rest of your day.
Pleasure. Take care.
Well, let's take a quick moment now to talk about Texas. With 3 months to go before the midterm elections, something very unusual is happening in that state. A Democrat leading the race for the U.S. Senate. It's a phenomenon that hasn't happened in a generation. CNN senior data analyst Harry Enton explains what's behind this.
It looks like we're heading towards a Texas showdown, and James Tallarico could make history, could be the first Democrat elected to the United States Senate from the Lone Star State since 1988. Oh, my goodness gracious. What are we talking about? Well, I just want to note how unusual it is. Well, James Tallarico, in an average of the last 2 polls, well, he's up by 3 points. Compare this to where Democrat Beto O'Rourke was at this point in the 2018 campaign during Trump's first term. Ted Cruz, the Republican, the incumbent Republican, was leading by 6 points. Indeed, James Tallarico's lead at this point is the first time a Democratic candidate for United States Senate from Texas has been leading at this point in a race since 1988. He is fueled by independents, whom Tallarico leads by 40 points among. Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke were actually tied among independents. But it's more than that. It's about how unpopular the Republican candidate Ken Paxton is compared to what we would normally see from a Republican in Texas. GOP nominees, net favorability, Texas Republicans. Ted Cruz, he was above water right there, plus 8 points. Look at Ken Paxton, way down there. Look at that, minus 12 points. That's favorable, minus unfavorable. Again, being fueled by independents. He is, get this, 47 points underwater down there in the Rio Grande Valley. My goodness gracious, minus 47. But it is also about President Trump, who, remember, he won in Texas, but now he is well underwater in Texas. His net popularity rating, minus 10 points, even worse than he was in term number 1. Cruz, very different from Paxton, and Trump, very different from Trump in term number 1. But you, my friend, are always the same. Absolutely fantastic. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Harry Enton. And still ahead here on CNN Newsroom, some of the top AI companies met with the White House to discuss safety rules and regulations for this thriving industry. What we know about the talks in a moment. Welcome back. Here are your business headlines. Crude oil prices have dropped to their lowest level in nearly a month. The drop comes after the U.S. Treasury Secretary said that he thinks that a deal to open the Strait of Hormuz could happen today. President Trump doubling down on that claim, telling Fox that the vital waterway will reopen soon or he will launch new strikes against Iran. A federal judge has set a March 2027 trial date for Paramount's bid to acquire Warner Brothers Discovery, the parent company of CNN. Paramount had hoped to finish the deal by this summer, but a group of state attorneys general and the Writers Guild of America, they both filed lawsuits last month seeking to stop the merger, citing antitrust grounds. In its first earnings report as a publicly traded company, SpaceX says that its revenue jumped 92% from last year, but the company remains unprofitable. The CEO, Elon Musk's push to spend heavily on AI has spooked investors, sending shares lower in late trading. And the White House reportedly told top artificial intelligence companies that it will not safety test some advanced AI models. Reuters citing multiple sources saying that the Trump administration discussed testing rules and regulations with tech leaders on Tuesday. CNN tech editor Lisa Edicia reports.
Top AI companies, including OpenAI, Google, Meta, and Anthropic, are meeting with the White House to discuss a framework that would allow the government to review advanced AI models before they're released publicly. This is part of an executive order that the president signed in June, but the discussions come after OpenAI and Anthropic have said they found instances of their models breaching other companies' systems. And this has heightened cybersecurity concerns and also raised more calls for there to be more control around the advancement of AI. The framework will be voluntary and the details of it will not be made public. And a lot of questions still remain about the execution of this framework, including who in the administration will be steering this initiative and how the government will decide what is considered a frontier AI model. Back to you.
Well, in a surprising example of artificial intelligence going rogue, the most advanced AI models from Anthropic and OpenAI, they went to new lengths to deceive real people during testing by Britain's AI Security Institute. The testing was done in a lab environment with relaxed security protections. Researchers say that the models created multiple fake identities and repeatedly contacted real people, trying to persuade them to insert malicious code into an online file transfer service. Both Anthropic and OpenAI say that they are investigating these incidents. With this year's World Cup boosted Cape Verde's goalkeeper into the spotlight, coming up the very latest on his decision to join up with Chile's largest soccer club. After a thrilling World Cup run, Cape Verde's team captain and veteran goalkeeper Vozinha is tight. He's taken his talents to Chile now. The 40-year-old has signed a 6-month contract with Chilean soccer club Colo-Colo. CNN's Christopher Ulloa with more.
The Vozinha frenzy continues. The 40-year-old goalkeeper from Cape Verde, Josimar Jose Évora Diaz, has finally been presented by the Colo-Colo team as his newest member. After finishing his training session with his teammates at the Estadio Monumental, Josimar Jose Évora Diaz said that his decision to join Colo-Colo was never in doubt, despite several days of uncertainty caused by the delay in his arrival. The global football sensation also expressed his happiness with the moment and also said that he will bring his mother and his friends to Chile once he's settled and has a home ready for them. What else did Vozinha have to say? Let's take a listen.
In soccer, I know there are many people behind you and the fans always want the best. I think all players also work day by day to be well prepared. Playing in the World Cup was great pressure for me. I played against the best national teams in the world, and I'm focused on working and helping the club achieve its goals.
A final welcome event is going to take place at the Estadio Monumental this Wednesday, where thousands of fans are expected to gather around to give Vozinha a final welcome to Colo-Colo. For CNN, Christopher Ulloa, Santiago, Chile.
And thank you so much for watching. I'll join you again in a few moments where we check back on our top story out of Michigan and our election results for this primary election. Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining me. I'm Polo Sandoval live in New York, and it is election night in America. Well, that has actually come and gone, but there is still one key race in particular that is waiting to be called at this hour. 5 states held primaries on Tuesday, determining who will face off in the November midterm elections, with a chance to possibly flip control of Congress. Voters went to the polls on Tuesday in Missouri, Kansas, Virginia, and Washington state, but right now all eyes remain on the crucial and battleground state of Michigan, with 93% of the votes in for the state's Democratic Senate primary. And it's been a close race, as you could tell here, just hours between progressive candidate Abdul El-Sayed and House Democrat Haley Stevens, who have both touted a new path forward for Democrats in the state. You see just a little over 20,000 votes that El-Sayed is ahead. Supporters earlier, they heard from both of these candidates. Here's what they told their crowds in Detroit about their hopes for the future.
Let's come together to build a movement that's even bigger, that's even stronger, that's even more powerful, that reaches into the very depths of this state, that reminds us the best of who we are and who we can be. That is the commitment I want all of us to be making as we leave here tonight.
And we'll hear more from his opponent, Haley Stevens, a little later. Our Jeff Zeleny is at Haley Stevens' headquarters in Detroit with more on what she told her supporters after the polls closed.
A progressive blowout it was not, regardless of the outcome of this vicious Democratic primary between Congresswoman Haley Stevens and progressive public health official Abdul El-Sayed. Congresswoman Stevens addressed her supporters in the wee hours after Election Day, urging them to wait a bit longer and then warning them to come together for November.
We've had a long, hard-fought primary, and we'll know soon who our nominee is going to be. And whoever wins is going to go and take on Mike Rogers. Republicans are going to do everything they can to throw all the dirt, all the mud, the kitchen sink at us, because they want to keep the U.S. Senate red. So Mike Rogers can keep rubber stamping Donald Trump's ridiculous agenda.
There's no doubt that this nationalized Senate race has come down to a very local matter. That is Detroit. That is Wayne County. It is the votes here that will determine whether Stevens can pull what would be considered now an upset win over Abdul El-Sayed. But regardless of the outcome, this was not a huge progressive sweep that the establishment feared. It was a very close race. So the bottom line is it means that both sides, regardless of who wins, have considerable work to do unifying the party before they take on Mike Rogers, the Republican nominee for this critical Michigan Senate seat. Jeff Zeleny, CNN, Detroit.
And joining me now from Los Angeles is Caroline Hellman, a Democratic strategist and political scientist. She's also a professor of critical theory and social justice at Occidental College. Caroline, it's always wonderful to see you.
Good to see you, Polo.
It's always great to have your company and analysis one election night after another as the numbers continue to change. So let's start with your initial take and your initial reaction as we continue to see numbers coming in.
Well, it seems pretty clear that the Democratic Socialist wave that was expected tonight is not happening, right? We saw the polling for Dr. El-Sayed way ahead. It was not supposed to be this close between this centrist, Haley Stevens, and the Democratic Socialist candidate. But we're also seeing mixed results in other states, right? In Missouri, we saw that Cori Bush tried to regain her seat as a Democratic Socialist and was unable to do so. There are a couple of other races that are very close, but for folks who were expecting the progressive wing of the Democratic Party to sweep tonight, that just didn't happen.
And to your earlier point, I mean, because the gap was expected to be so much wider, and now we're seeing this narrow margin, I mean, do you think that that's telling about sort of the deep divisions within the party? And if so, once we find out who moves on and wins, Tuesday's contest, how does the party then coalesce again?
Well, Polo, this is really a struggle for the soul of the Democratic Party that we've seen over the past few years. We actually have seen the progressive wing of the Democratic Party do relatively well, right? We have the mayor in New York City, the mayor in Seattle, the mayor in Washington, D.C. But at the end of the day, progressives may do well in certain parts in Democratic strongholds, but the question is whether or not they do well against, in the general primary, right, up against Republican candidates. And I will tell you that Donald Trump, the Donald Trump-backed candidate, Mike Rogers in Michigan, chomping at the bit to get El-Sayed as his opponent. He would much rather prefer him. He can paint him, you know, with this new lens that's coming up of the socialists lens that Donald Trump has been applying and the Republican Party have been applying. So they would love to go up against progressive candidates. And in many cases, they will get that opportunity if it's a Democratic stronghold.
Either Abdul El-Sayed or Haley Stevens, in your view, which one of these candidates could make achieving that unity perhaps a little easier compared to the other?
Well, it's been such a bloody battle in Michigan, but I really do think that it represents a much broader schism within the Democratic Party, much to do over what is happening in Gaza, right? And so you saw AIPAC, the pro-Israel PAC, really getting behind Haley Stevens, a lot of just brutal barbs back and forth during this primary. I think both of these candidates, whoever wins tomorrow, I would imagine that they're going to turn around and immediately try to bring the party together, because that's really the only hope going against, you know, a Trump-endorsed Republican candidate.
Do you think these two candidates could potentially appear together on the campaign trail leading up to November?
Oh, yes. I would imagine that they would be doing that. Maybe, you know, the tense feelings. I mean, if anyone who's worked on a campaign, you have to bury those down deep. But yes, I would imagine that they will come together like that, because if you look at the path for Democrats in the Senate, they need to gain 4 seats. That does not include Michigan. They have to hold on to this Michigan seat because it's being vacated by a Democrat. And so the path to taking control of the Senate for Democrats really runs through the Midwest, through these states that Donald Trump was able to take back in the 2024 election. And we know in Michigan in particular, Kamala Harris lost by 1.4 percentage points as Donald Trump took that state back. And that had much to do with the progressive wing being very critical of the stance of the Biden administration, including Kamala Harris's stance in 2024. So all roads lead through Michigan when it comes to Democrats taking the Senate.
Caroline, I wonder if we can close with voter turnout out of Michigan. It does appear to be impressive. I see here that once all the results are in, that the numbers could potentially either approach or surpass that record 1.5 million votes back in 2020. Obviously, high turnout doesn't necessarily tell us everything about what we can expect come November. But just considering those numbers alone, I mean, does it speak to the energy among Michigan Democrats, especially progressives in that state?
I think it does. And I think it's very clear to Michiganders that this is a national contest, right? While it might be a focus on their particular state, and obviously they're the only folks going to the polls, they know the national implications of this. So I think it bodes well for the Democratic Party that you have such high turnout in the primary. I expect to see a pretty high turnout, if not historic turnout, in the upcoming elections in November, given what's at stake. When you look at the enthusiasm numbers, Democrats are far above Republicans, mostly I think because Donald Trump's approval ratings are so low, right around 34%, and about 63% of Americans think that we're headed in the wrong direction. It's hard to get your folks to turn out to the polls with such low support or favorability ratings at the top. Not an issue on the Democratic side.
Yeah, and again, just to show our viewers, with 93% of some of those precincts reporting, only 20,000 votes, roughly 20,000 votes, separating Abdul El-Sayed and Haley Stevens. 4 a.m. there in Detroit. Clearly, though, those numbers continue to be counted. Caroline Hellman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Polo.
Well, Russian forces are targeting Kyiv with waves of ballistic missiles. Ukrainian officials say that 17 people were killed early on Wednesday and that more than 50 others were wounded. Fires broke out across the Ukrainian capital, with missiles destroying buildings as residents were sleeping inside. Officials are warning that the threat of more strikes, that threat remains. Search and rescue teams right now, they are looking through all the rubble trying to find people that are trapped. And this latest attack comes as Ukraine faces a low stockpile of missile interceptors. The Ukrainian Air Force saying that Russia launched 24 ballistic missiles and 4 anti-ship missiles overnight, but did not say whether they were intercepted. President Trump claiming that the Strait of Hormuz will be reopened soon, or that he would launch new strikes against Iran. And this comes as Qatar says efforts to end the conflict between the U.S. and Iran are in very progressive stages. Mediators are currently focusing on finding a short-term resolution that would bring Washington and Tehran back to the negotiating table. In the meantime, sources are telling us that the U.S. military has used up nearly 80% of its interceptors for a key missile defense system. And all of this as a senior military commanders, as they are warning of dangerously low munition stockpiles. Gulf allies are also sounding the alarm about how a shortage of air defense systems could possibly impact their ability to intercept potential Iranian strikes. That's if President Trump decides to escalate the war. CNN's Leila Garagoslu joining me from London. Morning, Leila.
Hi, how are you? Yeah, so we're getting a few more details when it comes to Oman and this Iranian deal. And President Trump just yesterday said that he feels that a deal is quite close. Take a listen.
On the Strait of Hormuz, the Axios is reporting that you might open as soon as tomorrow.
Could happen. Tomorrow or the next day.
Tomorrow,
a lot of progress has been made.
Now, the Iranians have not really said very much about how things are going. They have been very clear that this is going to be a bilateral agreement and that the U.S. isn't who they are talking to directly. As you mentioned, the Qataris have also been rather optimistic, although they have hedged what they're seeing going on with this deal by saying that it is progressing forward, but it's very unclear how things are going to go. What we do know is that this is going to be an interim deal. One of the Iranian negotiators just yesterday said that it would be about 1 to 3 months, most likely around 60 days. And that's kind of where this deal would lie as they try to look forward to some other more substantial deal. Now, a lot of analysts that I've spoken to over the last 24 hours have said that this could be a way of reviving the now collapsed MOU and getting things back on track to have some sort of discussion over those more difficult issues like the missiles program that Iran has or the nuclear program. But in the meantime, they're really focused on finding a way to alleviate the economic pain that we're seeing from the strait being closed, Polo.
Progressive stages that could mean actual progress. We'll have to see, though, if that turns out to be the case. Leila Garagoslu, thank you so much for your reporting. Still to come, part of this SpaceX rocket was expected to crash into the moon. What NASA is hoping to learn from this highly unusual event. And also, hundreds of people flee their homes as one of the most active volcanoes in Central America erupts outside the Guatemalan capital. Details on the way. You're watching CNN Newsroom. Welcome back to CNN Newsroom. Want to check back on some of these live results coming out of the critical state of Michigan, with now 94% of the votes are in for the state's Democratic Senate primary. And it, as you can see here, is a very close one. A little over 20,000 votes separating Abdul El-Sayed and Haley Stevens. These candidates have both touted a new path forward for Democrats in their state. The one who advances to the critical midterm contests will face off against Republican Mike Rogers. And we're also following the latest developments on the Washington state wildfires. 37-year-old Aaron Farinacci, a convicted felon, is now charged with first-degree arson in connection with one of the 3 major wildfires that are currently burning in Spokane County. His arraignment set for Thursday. He was arrested on Monday after investigators said that he was spotted kneeling in the grassy area where the fire started over the weekend. Well, they say that he had waterproof matches and a lighter on him. The Spokane fires have now burned more than 10,000 acres since they broke out on Saturday. I mean, look at this firefighter's point of view in what looks like a war zone. Hundreds of homes and other structures have been destroyed, and authorities are saying that thousands more are at risk. About 65,000 residents were forced to evacuate, and officials say that 14 people who initially could not be reached have now been safely found. They've been contacted, and no injuries or deaths have been reported there in Washington. I want to go to Greece now, where firefighters are racing to strengthen containment lines west of Athens as more heat and high winds are expected in the coming days. Officials are saying that several fires were brought under control in mountain and coastal areas just outside of the Greek capital, where the winds stayed relatively calm recently. Let's go to journalist Elinda Labrapoulou, who joins me from Parga, Greece. So, Elinda, what is the very latest coming out of Greece?
Well, the good news that we've had today is that this mega fire has been contained. At the moment, there are no rekindlings, but of course, firefighters have been working throughout the night. Over 500 people have been on the ground trying to make sure they're clearing the areas, making sure that no more problems arise. And as soon as we had daylight, we had the aircrafts jump into the fight as well. So at the moment, things are looking good. It also means that residents are coming back to at least the areas that are safe now. Assessments have begun. We know that over 100 houses have been completely destroyed. The government has already announced some measures to help those affected. And the causes of the fire are also being assessed. 2 people have been arrested in connection to this mega fire. That indications are that it is linked to a faulty power line in a private wind farm. We'll be getting more on that as this investigation continues. But for now, we're also getting the first figures of the immense devastation that this fire has caused. And the Athens Observatory is now estimating that with this fire, we're looking at 42% of greater Athens forested areas having been destroyed in just 9 years. As you understand, the scale is immense. There have been 15 big fires in the area in that time. And the worst ones, the worst affected area is western Greater Athens, the area that this fire was as well, Paulo.
That is an absolutely heartbreaking figure. It is telling, especially when you couple it with some of those heartbreaking images that we're also seeing. But nonetheless, that's 2 consecutive days of some promising developments. So let's hope for a third. Elinda Labrapoulou, thank you so much, as always, for all your reporting. And hundreds of people are fleeing their homes in Guatemala. And this is one of the most active volcanoes in Central America, enters its most intense phase of eruption. The Fuego volcano is about 50 kilometers southwest of the capital, Guatemala City. And it's been spewing lava like this, as well as some ash, since Monday.
During the day, you can't see it, but at night, it's a serious thing. So you can't sleep. You stay alert to anything, but it is more dangerous tonight because you can see it. Because for a moment, it wasn't making noise, but the little red bits go all the way down. And then since it has a clear path, it's scary.
One of several people waiting in shelters at this hour. And 3 regions are under red alerts as authorities are urging people to move into some of these facilities, some of these shelters. Guatemala's defense minister says that security forces will patrol evacuated areas to prevent looting, which is what many people say is keeping them from leaving their homes. A few thousand migrants are stranded in Spain's Ceuta territory in northern Africa. Aid workers saying that many are fleeing war, poverty, and violence from countries including Sudan, Mali, and Yemen. But after the historic border rush into the tiny Spanish enclave, there are other parts of that enclave that have now gone back to normal, as CNN's Portugal's correspondent Helena Lins explains.
One could say there are 2 Ceutas at the moment, while thousands of migrants are stranded on the beach or wandering in the streets of the neighborhoods. Here at the center, locals are celebrating their patron saint. Just behind me is the Virgin of Africa, and today locals come here to lay flowers. They've been doing that for a few hours now, and the next day will be the day of the procession. This is the religious moment of this celebration that after that would give room for 10 days of cultural events, some entertainment around Ceuta. Those have been cancelled because of the migrant crisis, because of security reasons. So this is a sign of normality returning to Ceuta, but also not everything has come back to normal, and this is an example, these 10 days of celebration. That migrants continue to be here in Ceuta. Many have decided not to go back. For now, a lot of them are from sub-Saharan Africa. They say they have nothing to go back to. They talk about war in their countries, so they are still staying here and waiting for help. They hope to be able to claim asylum and enter the center to continue the process.
All right, thanks for that report. And calls are currently growing for embattled Republican Max Miller to leave Congress amid allegations of domestic abuse. We'll bring you the latest developments in a moment. Michigan is inching closer to the final results of a tightly contested Democratic Senate primary. Right now, I'll show you some of the results. About 94% of votes have been counted thus far. In fact, that number went up just a few minutes ago. And it seems a progressive candidate, Abdul El-Sayed, holding onto a narrow lead over House Democrat Haley Stevens. Earlier, El-Sayed addressed his supporters in Detroit. He told the crowd that if he wins, he's determined to beat former House Republican Mike Rogers come the November midterms.
And so as folks ask, if and when we win this race, how are you going to beat Mike Rogers and their money? I want you to remind them that if we come through this, when we come through this, inshallah, that we'll have taken $70 million on the chin and kept fighting back.
More on the Michigan primary in a moment, but right now Republican Congressman Max Miller is refusing to drop his reelection bid as he faces abuse allegations, and they're coming from his ex-wife, Emily Marino, allegations that the congressman denies. Marino has accused Miller of multiple instances of domestic abuse, including an incident in which she says that he held a gun to her. Well, those allegations were revealed during a police interview as detectives looked into how the couple's young daughter broke her collarbone. Well, no charges were ever filed in connection to the injuries on the little girl. But separately, Miller's attorney is now apologizing for releasing a sensitive image of the congressman's child in documents shared online. And all of this is happening as he faces a re-election in Ohio's 7th congressional district, which is a GOP stronghold. Meanwhile, his ex-father-in-law, Republican Senator Bernie Moreno, is calling on Miller to leave Congress altogether. On Tuesday, he told reporters that all of this has been, quote, the 7th level of hell for his entire family. Miller has also denied allegations that he abused ex-girlfriend Stephanie Grisham, who's a former White House communications director. Grisham has just filed a temporary restraining order against him as part of an ongoing suit. And earlier, CNN's Jake Tapper asked Miller about these allegations. Listen to this.
I then played Lauren Fox 3 separate audio videos, separate audio videos of my daughter saying, I do not want to go to mommy's, I do not want mommy's, and I do not feel safe.
Now, your ex-wife stated to police that your child told her in the days leading up to the discovery of the injury, quote, Daddy, kill you. And your ex-wife also said your child had said, Daddy angry, and Daddy's house is scary. Now, according to your wife, your daughter articulated these statements to Children and Family Services.
I wish you could talk to my beautiful baby girl. She can't string together sentences like that. She's 2.5 years old. She doesn't have the ability to articulate any of what you just said.
You just told me that she had said that she was scared to go to mommy's house.
She is, and I have video of it.
But now you're saying that she's not capable of saying, Daddy, kill you? I mean, it seems like she's either able to say one but not the other.
Jake,
that doesn't make sense.
Here to dive deeper into all of this is attorney and political commentator Madeline Somerville. She joins me live from Atlanta. Madeline, thank you so much for either staying up late or getting up early for us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Listen, I want to get your thoughts on what's happening right now in Michigan as the vote count continues. But first, just off that last story that you just listened to, I wonder if I can get your thoughts on this pressure that seems to be mounting against Ohio Representative Max Miller. He says he's determined to stay in his reelection bid. But he also said in his conversation with my colleague Jay Tapper that President Trump spoke to him earlier this week and said that the president acknowledged that this would be a tough election for him because of these mounting abuse allegations. So in your view, do you see President Trump or perhaps House Speaker Mike Johnson stepping in and forcing him to step aside for another candidate because the stakes are so high?
The stakes are so high, and I think it's particularly an issue because of what's just happened with Graham Plattner for the Democrats. I think it's not a good look, and it's quite hypocritical for the Republicans at this time to take this issue with Max Miller and set it aside as if there isn't any real allegation to pay attention to. I think, however, in the past, with for example, President Trump, it hasn't played a major role in whether or not voters actually turn out to vote for them. There's this perception on the Republican side that something like, that the Democrats will only agree or will always agree with somebody who's making an accusation, but that's not the truth, right? In this particular case, there were 3 women who came forward, just like with Graham Plattner, there were 3 women who came forward, and you assess their credibility, just like you were at trial, you make a decision. And the Republicans in the past have decided to, kind of void that process and only look at the political aspects of it. So I think it's really a toss-up right now, but either way, it's not a good look.
And as an attorney, Madeline, I'm just curious on your thoughts about what was also discussed in his conversation with Jake Tapper, which was that, that Miller's own attorney had admitted to sharing what's been described as a sensitive photo of Miller's little girl. I mean, how does all that play out as the investigations continue? And of course, as he maintains, as Miller maintains that, that no wrongdoing.
Yeah, so I'm an attorney, and I also worked on policy for DFACS in Georgia, which is the Department of Family and Children Services, the equivalent of which is involved in this particular investigation. When it comes to sensitive material like that in particular, and when it comes to elections too, it triggers people. It triggers people who have experienced something like this in their lives. It triggers people on both sides. On the right, people are thinking about issues of grooming. And on the left, people are thinking about instances of sexual abuse that people have been too afraid to come forward about. And perhaps people on the right are thinking that too, but regardless, it's a political issue on both sides. And particularly, the one thing that we can come together on in this country, right, is that nobody wants children to be hurt. And I do think that you cross a special line when it comes to exposing your child to danger like this, and a lack of care and a lack of sensitivity. And in a political race like this, you can't afford to make a mistake like that.
Yeah, it's absolutely disturbing that was even allowed to happen, even though it's just on for a short amount of time. Let's pivot now, if we could, to politics, or another angle of politics, which is, of course, the elections and the election results that are coming in. Let's bring that up for our viewers while I get just your take on what your reaction is to some of these numbers. I mean, we're expecting, according to several polls, a double-digit lead for Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, yet here we are with 94% of the vote in and only about just under 21,000 votes separating him and Haley Stevens.
So there's a tremendous amount of energy that's around this race, and for a good reason, right? We understand that this is a swing state, and it's the ultimate test of whether or not somebody who bears the moniker socialist, right, in whatever form it is, democratic socialist here, has a chance, whether they have a real chance of coming up against anybody. And one of the major tests that we needed to see here in looking at these 4 most important counties, and those would be Washtenaw, Macomb, Oakland, and Wayne counties, right? It's a wide swath of people, right? We've got people from different socioeconomic statuses, different races, and ultimately what we've been able to decipher from all of this is that in a swing state, a socialist has a chance, even if it's not a wide margin lead, which we did. You're absolutely right. People thought that it was going to be a much wider margin, but the fact is that he's in play. And the major obstacle I think that El-Sayed had to overcome in the beginning was the same one as Mamdani, which is that folks who are in less affluent positions, right, or folks who have a lot to lose if a Republican wins, felt like perhaps they couldn't maybe afford to take that risk to vote for somebody who might not win, right, because they bear that socialist moniker. But what we're seeing now is that actually that's not nearly as much of a risk as people think it is, or that they're just so tired of all the hyperbolic politics that they're ready to set that aside and vote their conscience.
What do you think drew voters to Haley Stevens as well, given the performance that we saw Tuesday night and into Wednesday?
Yeah, so a lot of people thought that this election in particular was going to be a referendum on the issue of Gaza and the state of Israel. And on the left, right, this is our culture war. So I think last year, right, the big culture was related to trans issues. Now it's about fundamentally the same thing, which is assigning human dignity to each person, regardless of where they're from or who you're supposed to support. And I think in this particular case, right, when it comes to AIPAC being involved, or when it comes to El-Sayed speaking up about it, I think the point is that people are going to vote their conscience at the end of the day. People have the courage to be able to do that, and that Stevens' support from AIPAC wasn't definitive here. And I think that Stevens also offers a safe choice, again, for those folks who can't afford to perhaps lose to a Republican. People will think that she has a greater chance of winning against a Republican in the general once more people come out to vote.
Madeline Somerville, thank you so much for all that analysis as we continue to watch those voting results come out of Michigan. Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you.
Well, President Trump says that he hasn't determined yet whether U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro will remain in her role. Trump confronted Pirro in a tense meeting this week over her conclusion that the renovation of the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool was botched. But Trump has insisted that the damage was caused by vandalism, not on construction problems. CNN's Kristen Holmes has more from the White House.
President Trump laid into U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro at a meeting at the White House over that court filing that said that the damage to the reflecting pool was over shoddy workmanship and not because of vandalism. But we are also told that in this heated back and forth, this meeting that lasted nearly an hour, Jeanine Pirro also brought her own receipts. She brought both a file box and what seemed to be a briefcase filled with documents that she said supported her claims that this was an actual problem with the workmanship and not because of vandals. Now, this episode has caused a huge rift between Pirro and the Secretary of the Interior, Doug Burgum, who is also in that meeting. Pirro has blamed his department, has blamed him personally, saying that they did not provide her with enough information before they brought the charges. Now, behind the scenes, President Trump has been raging about Pirro, talking about potentially firing her. But when it came to this actual meeting, he stopped short of actually firing her or asking for her resignation. Now, what is clear is there's a growing, deepening divide between Burgum and Pirro, and it doesn't seem as though this episode is over yet. It is unclear what President Trump's reaction to Pirro was in regards to Burgum, but she certainly made her case in front of him. It seems as though her job is safe, at least for now. Kristen Holmes, CNN, the White House.
Ukraine is accusing Russia of using drones to target individual civilians and accusing Moscow of committing new blatant war crimes. We have the details on the way. Ukraine is accusing Russia of committing a war crime, one that was caught on camera. Police releasing the video showing a Russian drone chasing down a vegetable vendor in Kherson. Eventually, in the video, you could see that he does duck for cover before that drone explodes. Moscow insisting that it does not target civilians, but Ukraine says that the footage proves otherwise. Claire Sebastian has the details and a warning that the video that you're about to see is disturbing.
At first, it looks like a game. The man, a vegetable seller, tries to duck behind his van, the drone whining ever closer. But this, Ukraine says, is how Russia likes to spread fear in the frontline city of Kherson. Unbelievably, the 52-year-old victim survived with injuries and hours later was able to recount his experience.
My wife started running away and it started circling over the car. I gestured to it. Look, these are vegetables. But it started charging at me. So I started running around the car. Then we were side by side. It hit me and I just fell. My back is all torn.
CNN has reached out to the Russian Ministry of Defense for comment. Moscow regularly claims it doesn't target civilians. 3.5 years on from these euphoric scenes as Kherson was liberated from Russian occupation, daily life in Ukraine's largest frontline city is increasingly dangerous. Of the 32 civilians killed here in July, 29 died in drone attacks, authorities say. this from late July shows a near miss. Anti-drone nets covering streets, now the new normal here. And so-called human safaris, Russian drones seeming to hunt down civilians in the open, a tactic first used at scale in mid-2024, are happening now on a daily basis here, President Zelensky said Tuesday. This a lucky escape in a war where civilians are paying an ever higher price. Claire Sebastian, CNN, London.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is speaking out for the first time since the U.S. said that it reached a disarmament agreement with Hamas.
President Trump and his team believe they can bring about Hamas's disarmament and the demilitarization of Gaza. We are examining that. They have sent us a draft. We did not agree to it. It is not our draft. We sent them our comments. In fact, we sent our comments before the media campaign on this issue began.
That video posted on Prime Minister Netanyahu's account. He is seeking to reassure Israeli voters that President Trump's latest push in Gaza is far from final. However, Netanyahu is facing mounting pressure from the White House to fully end the fighting in Gaza and support Hamas's commitment to disarmament. And still ahead, growing calls for an investigation. 2 Senate Democrats are demanding answers about a Trump meme coin that lost billions of dollars in value. What we know about the case. NASA has been watching closely for the impact of part of a SpaceX rocket that was supposed to crash into the moon. In fact, it was projected to collide with the lunar surface a few hours ago, but no update from NASA, at least not yet. The Falcon 9 rocket carried 2 robotic commercial lunar landers into space. Its first stage returned safely to Earth, but instead of burning up in Earth's atmosphere, the upper stage was pulled onto a collision course with the moon. Scientists are now hoping to study the incident to learn more about the moon and also how to better shield their astronauts for future NASA missions to the lunar surface. In a surprising example of artificial intelligence going rogue, the most advanced AI models from Anthropic and OpenAI went to new lengths to deceive real people during testing by Britain's AI Security Institute. It was done in a lab-controlled environment with intentionally relaxed security protections. Researchers say that the models created multiple fake identities and repeatedly tried persuading real people to insert malicious code into an online file transfer service. Both Anthropic and OpenAI say they're investigating. The White House reportedly told top artificial intelligence companies that it will not safety test some advanced AI models. CNN tech editor Lisa Edicio with more on the meeting.
Top AI companies, including OpenAI, Google, Meta, and Anthropic, are meeting with the White House to discuss a framework that would allow the government to review advanced AI models before they're released publicly. This is part of an executive order that the president signed in June, but the discussions come after OpenAI and Anthropic have said they found instances of their models breaching other companies' systems. And this has heightened cybersecurity concerns and also raised more calls for there to be more control around the advancement of AI. The framework will be voluntary and the details of it will not be made public. And a lot of questions still remain about the execution of this framework, including who in the administration will be steering this initiative and how the government will decide what is considered a frontier AI model. Back to you.
Well, now to a CNN exclusive. 2 top Senate Democrats are demanding an investigation into President Trump's so-called meme coin cryptocurrency, the meme coin cryptocurrency. Elizabeth Warren and Richard Blumenthal, they are now calling for the Securities and Exchange Commission to look into this matter. Here's CNN's David Goldman with more.
So 2 Democratic senators, Senators Warren and Blumenthal, both are saying that the president might have been involved in a scam involving his meme coin. So what's the argument here? Well, more or less, the value of this meme coin that the president sold through his company, the Trump Organization, along with his family, went from $9 billion to around $400 million. And the folks who invested in it, well, they lost close to $4 billion. Meanwhile, the president and his family, they made off pretty well. They've made more than $600 million. That's according to the president's own financial transactions that he revealed as part of his annual financial revelations that he has to make as president. And, you know, that sounds on the surface like a scam, right? Well, not necessarily. So the president here, irrespective of anything that the coin did, whether it went up or down in value, was always going to make money on this. And that's because the president basically invented a coin out of nothing. And every time that someone bought or sold the coin, he gets a licensing fee and a transaction fee. But then the people who decided that the coin was worthless, well, they ended up holding the bag. And so the president would have made a ton of money if the coin maintained its value. But even if it didn't, he gets all of those transaction fees and licensing fees. Now, this is actually something that's fairly common in meme coins. They're valueless, and yet there is something called a rug pull where people say, hey, buy my coin. And when it goes up in value, they say, never mind, and they take all the money and run. That's not really what happened here, though. The president made money on the transaction part of it, but there's not really a ton of evidence that this was a scam. It's just that it was a meme coin, which is inherently valueless. And if people don't think that it's worth anything, the value goes down. So the 2 Democratic senators are going to investigate this. We'll see if anything comes of it. In the meantime, it's not great for the people who invested in it. It's pretty good for the president, though.
David Goldman, thank you. An engineering professor turning her childhood vision for jumping ropes into reality. Tahira Reed Smith, she developed a machine that can turn double Dutch without the need of 2 people. The app-controlled prototype is called Jump Dreams. Double Dutch is a strategic activity that requires coordination, timing, and agility to keep pace with the ropes. Smith says that her next dream is to get her invention into production. Now a quick last check of the vote count in the crucial battleground state of Michigan. The number of precincts reporting now up to 94%. The 94% of the vote. It's now showing that in the state's Democratic primary, it's now been a close call for hours between progressive candidate Abdul El-Sayed and House Democrat Haley Stevens, who have both touted a new path forward for Democrats in the state. The winner of this going on to face Republican Mike Rogers in that critical midterm election. Stay with CNN for continued coverage out of Michigan. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Polo Sandoval in New York. CNN Headline Express is next.